Do you swear or affirm the statements you're to make tonight to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
I do.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Approval of the April invoices. Please take a look, Commissioners, and I need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Ms. Mizell. Second by Mr. Smith. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Pass. Approval of the April 11th minutes from our last meeting. Again, take a look at those, and I'll need a motion.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by Mrs. Mizell.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Mifflin. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Approval of the May agenda. Now, we do have several changes, so I should go through them. I'll go through them first. If you're here for PDP 2019-07 Cherry Blossom Village Amended Master Plan, that actually has been withdrawn tonight. So if you're here for that, again, it's been withdrawn. More than likely, it'll be heard next month. No? They'll have to reapply. Same with PSP 2019-01, Cherry Blossom Village Phase 9. If you're here for that one, again, that one also is withdrawn, and they'll have to reapply as well. So notices will, in fact, then go out to those folks. If you're here for either of those, again, those have both been withdrawn.
So they have not been postponed?
No, they have not been postponed.
Okay. Other withdrawals, there's the FSP 2019-21, the Richard Hewlett property final subdivision plat to divide one tract into two tracts, creating one 5.4 acre tract and a 16.2 acre remainder tract. That one has also been withdrawn. Have I missed anything else, Joe? On the withdrawn?
No, that's all.
So those be, okay. So I need an approval of the May agenda with those changes.
At the workshop on Monday, we had Ashton Grove to be continued.
We could do that now, you think?
You could cover that under the next item, postponements and withdrawals.
Yeah, that's what.
Okay.
You're ahead of yourself, Mr. Mifflin.
Sorry about that.
So I need an approval of the May agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the May agenda.
So we have a motion by Mr. Smith
Second.
and a second by Mr. Stone. All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Okay. And then items for postponement and withdrawal. And I guess I could have done our withdrawals then too. So we have those two that are all three that are withdrawn. To Mr. Mifflin's point, ZMA 2019-22 Ashton Grove Commercial Zone Change Request for 2.35 acres from R2 PUD to B4 located south side of McClellan Circle and Bevins Lane, which is a public hearing, is being continued per the request of the attorney. So if you're here for the Ashton Grove Commercial, it's a continuance. We'll hear it more than likely next month, potentially.
Representative for the applicant to come up and just officially ask for the continuance.
Mr. Langford, are you going to speak on behalf of the applicant, or? Okay.
Bruce Langford for the applicant, and we would like to have that continued until next meeting.
Okay. Think any questions for the applicant? Okay. Probably.
That does mean no notices will be
Right. So if you are here for that, no new notices will be sent. This will be continued to next month, which is usually the second Thursday of every month. So, thank you, Mr. Langford. Any other postponements or withdrawals? I think that is in fact it. Okay. So next on the agenda is consent agenda items. The first one is that we have consent eligible as under old business C, PDP 2018-56 ML Georgetown Paris final development plan approval of a 7,000 square foot restaurant. If I'm not mistaken, the reason we're hearing that one, or it's a consent eligible, is that was asked to be brought back to the commission for final by an adjoining property owner. So is there anybody here or against to speak on behalf or against the ML Georgetown Paris LLC? Do you remember, Joe, who the person was? If
Yeah. Bruce, you want to invest?
Okay.
The attorney for Big Lots was here, Mr. Sewer. I sent him a certified letter. I received it. He received it. I got the green card back. He's not here. We would like to go ahead with that.
Okay. So this one is consent eligible. So if anybody like to make a motion to approve
I make a
PDP
motion.
2018-56, we have a motion by Mrs. Mizell and second by Mr. Vest. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, approved. Mr. Langford, if you'd like to go see Mr. Perkins. Next one, and I think we're going to end up having to hear it, is the Jones property, FSP 2019-17, final subdivision plat to divide one track into 4 tracks, creating a 6.14 acre track, 5.88 acre track, 5.04 acre track, and a 5.16 acre remainder track located at Willowbrook Lane. Is there anybody here to speak against that? Okay, so we will hear that one. Next one is, I'm just gonna go through them all, and if there's a couple that are consent eligible. I know we will in fact have to hear Marlane Farm property, that one we had to hear.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I thought we discussed Monday that would be be continued so that they could verify those 5 driveways before we came back to hear it. And the reason I say that is, I know we talked about doing that, and I brought it to your attention that I had been contacted by property owners and had passed that word along.
We need to.
I thought we were gonna hear it tonight, and then that would be a point of discussion.
Well,
Or did we decide?
I'm pretty
to
sure we
post-
decided to continue it, and then that's what I notified
We need to
them by
make sure that-
emails, and they both wrote back and
everybody
said,
says
very good.
All right, well,
Thank
that's
you.
another continuance then that I didn't know about. So,
Mark, I did not get notice that it's going to be continued.
And the reason for it, Chip, was that there were 3 entrances that either needed to be verified by DOT or approved by DOT. Since that's 60% of the entrances,
Okay, will you all approve it based on me getting that, because that letter's on the way, I've already talked to them. Those entrances have been there for 50 years, 100 years, they're not new entrances. They've been there a long time.
not all 5 of them.
No, the 3 have been there for many, many years.
that was a problem, Chip, is on the map itself, there's 5 entrances, and our staff went out there, and I think they could potentially verify 2
2 of them.
of.
There's 3 that I think I can verify, and there's 2 tracks that are accessed off of, track.
Chip, would you want to come to the microphone, just for the record, so we can get your name and address and all that, and record it?
So are we going to hear this
Chip
now?
Foley,
Well-
220 Quail Run Drive.
Yeah.
I'd like to go ahead and hear it, because we're planning on selling this property next month. We met with Department of Transportation, Richard Baker.
I think, though,
6
the
weeks
issue
ago.
we've got, Mr. Foley, is our attorneys reached out to everybody and told them it was going to be continued.
But not to everybody, but to the 2
the
parties.
2 parties.
Yeah, one across the road, one adjacent, that asked about that, because they were coming to oppose it. And I said, well, don't bother, because it was determined today at workshop that there's too many entrances that just haven't been verified.
And I think the issue we had on Monday evening, just to fill you in, Mr. Foley, because we're not going to be able to hear this tonight, in all fairness to everybody, that's not the first time that, is it the engineer had actually listed a lot of access roads that weren't there. And
The access roads that we're listing are there. There's no 2 ways about it. There's 2 of them are blacktopped, one of them's gravel. They've been there for many, many years.
But on the map, there's 5 listed, and there's, per our staff, there's not 5 there.
Well,
I'm just telling you what my staff tells me, and I've got to rely. I didn't drive myself there on this particular application, so.
Track 2 and 3
Why
are
don't
accessed
you,
by
yeah, why don't
4.
you talk to Ben, and unfortunately, it is what it is. Sorry, Mr. Foley. So that one will be postponed.
Continued.
Continued is the,
That'd be fine.
yeah,
sure.
continued.
Excuse me,
Yes, sir.
I'm Sam Arnold, I represent Marlin Farm. We'll continue to when?
Next month,
month.
2nd Thursday of the month. We have workshop on the Monday before, which is beneficial and open to the public. So it's open to public, applicant, people who are opposed to. A lot of times we do talk, we hash some things out the Monday before the meeting, so it'd be, okay? Thank you, sir, and apologize for the confusion. PDP 2019-19, 100 Icabana Drive, preliminary development plan for a 15,929 square foot retail building located at 100 Icabana Drive. Is consent eligible? And I think the only, we did have 2 variances, and at the workshop we discussed they may be possibly enough to do consent. But is anybody here against or you're against it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll hear that one as well then. And then Jewett Properties, FSP 2019-20, Jewett Property, Toyota Two-Show, preliminary subdivision plat to subdivide the Jewett property into 3 tracts and to create parcels for the access and future right-of-way dedication located at 257 Rogers Gap Road. We will be hearing. Richard Hewlett was withdrawn, and then next one, ZMA 2019, was continued. So those are the only other, we passed the one consent. So I guess the first one then will be new business. We're going to hear FSP 2019-17, the Jones property. Final subdivision plat to divide 1 tract into 4 tracts, creating one 6.14 acre tract, one 5.88 acre tract, one 5.04 acre tract, and a 5.16 acre remainder tract located at Willowbrook Lane. Ms. Michaela, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mark. All right. Like you said, this is located at Willowbrook Lane. It's zoned A1 agricultural, and all the surrounding properties are also zoned A1. The project site is approximately 22.22 acres and is located at the tail end of the Willowbrook cluster subdivision out there. You can see, so this is the cluster subdivision part of it, and then this is the project site that we're looking at here. So they're proposing 4 tracts out there, approximately 5 acres. One of them will be 6 acres. All 4 tracts do show the required setbacks and meet our regulations, but I'm first going to just quickly take you through the history of the Willowbrook cluster subdivision. There was some confusion. You received a letter about whether this was actually only had 1 dwelling credit or whether it was able to have the 4 dwelling credits for the 4 tracts that are proposed. So this is the preliminary subdivision plat and the master plan that was approved by the Planning Commission in 2001. So right here is the tract that we're looking at, the 22-acre tract that we're discussing tonight. Here is where the proposed and now existing cluster subdivision was for Willowbrook Lane, and this was always the proposed preserved area for this portion of the cluster subdivision. And then this is the plat that was approved that showed the 20 cluster lots and then the 75-acre preserved area. That was also approved in 2001. So again, this is where the existing cluster subdivision is now. This is where the preserved area is at 75 acres that was required to meet our density requirements. And then this is where the project site that we're discussing tonight is. It was labeled as future development, and in the master plan it was shown to be a future cluster subdivision. And then again, this is just another plat that was recorded that officially created this 25-acre tract. It was essentially a mortgage plat. It was labeled as non-buildable, but it was just to separate it off. And then again, down here you can see where the preserved area is at 75 acres, where the existing cluster subdivision is. And then finally, how it became 22 acres is approximately 2.7 acres was consolidated in with the preserved area because a portion of the preserved area down here was consolidated into a new tract, a 5-acre tract that has an existing home on it now. So this is what our research led to, is that this project site was always intended to be developed as a future cluster subdivision. So that's what we're looking at. And then this is the proposed plat that the applicant has put forth, showing the 4 5-acre tracts here, extending off Willowbrook Lane. Our problem with the plat that was submitted was that it wasn't showing that it was going to meet county road standards. When a stub road is extended beyond 150 feet and if it's serving 4 tracks, we require that meet county road standards and that there's a 55-foot right-of-way for a cul-de-sac and then a 45-foot paved cul-de-sac. So the plat that was submitted wasn't showing that. Since then, the applicant has agreed to meet county road standards, so this plat isn't showing it, but if the commission does choose to approve it, I would just ask that a condition be placed that it meet county road standards and that it be platted and bonded prior to the final subdivision plat approval. And that's it. Like I said, I had recommended denial on the preliminary subdivision plat based on the fact that it wasn't showing that was meeting county road standards. Staff wasn't willing to support that, but since the applicant has indicated that they will meet county road standards if approved, so. No, it would be required to be a paved turnaround and a paved road. A 20-foot, I can go back to that, sorry. Here are the county road standards. It'd be a 45-foot paved cul-de-sac with a 55-foot right-of-way and then a 20-foot paved roadway. Willowbrook Lane now is 18-foot, but since county road standards have increased to the 20-foot paved roadway, so that's what they would be required to meet. Anyone else have any questions for me? Or?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
In the original development, you said this was always listed as non-buildable?
No, it was always intended to be a future cluster subdivision.
Okay.
Extended beyond what's already existing out there. There was one plat that was recorded as a non-buildable that essentially transferred 25 acres over to create that tract. And then a couple of years later, that transfer and consolidation plat was recorded that created what's now 22 acres rather than the 25.
Okay. So the 75 acres was enough to include this?
The 75 acres was the preserved area for the 20 cluster lots that were created. That's what was required. So the total subdivision was 100 acres, and then the dwelling credits, the density matched out. So that's why you have the 75-acre preserved area. So that has, I believe, no dwelling credits with it. Yep, so the 75 acres has no dwelling credits, and then the 22-acre tract that we're looking at for the project site has the typical density requirements, which is 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. So.
Any other questions for Ms. Michaela? Thank you, Ms. Michaela.
Yep.
The applicant like to speak? Or attorney representing the applicant? Mrs. Jones, please.
I'm the owner and the developer. My surveyor is out sick tonight, so he wasn't able to make it. But I'm just here to answer any questions that anybody has.
Anybody have questions for the applicant? And I know we'll have a few questions of the audience, so, okay. Thank you, Mrs. Jones.
Thank you.
Questions or comments by the audience? And I do have a letter, so Joe, do you want me to read this letter in its, in whole? Or just Charlie?
That'd be fine. That might be the easiest thing, because if you summarize it,
yeah, I may miss
quite
something.
the same. We've heard enough about that lately, so we don't need to do
John, would you rather speak? Where'd he go? Oh, there he is. John, would you rather speak to your letter, or do you want me to read it? I'll be either way.
I thought maybe what I could do to help you out, Mark, I get up and read the letter first, just to you guys, so it's part of the
Sure,
record.
go right ahead, Mr.
As
Sherrill.
long as I can see, I'll do that.
If you can't, let me know, and I'll read the
All
rest
right.
for you.
Yeah, I think you're some younger than me, maybe. Anyway, for the record, my name is John Sharp, and I'm adjacent landowner to the property that we're talking about tonight, and also adjacent landowner to the Willowbrook subdivision. Matter of fact, I'm a bit more than that. I'm the guy that designed Willowbrook development back in its day. The guy that took 2 or 3 years to do the cluster ordinance way back when, and was also part of the Willowbrook developers that developed all this property, the Willowbrook subdivision back in the day. So I did send a letter up here, and I'll read it to you, and I'll go back and sit down. Anyway, it's addressed to the Planning Commission. So it has been brought to my attention by the Willowbrook Homeowners Association, property owners in Craigmore Estates, and numerous calls inquiring about Rita Jones requesting approval of 4 or 5 acre lots in the area. This property is between our lands located between King Run Road and Craig Lane and was a part of the Sharp Farms. My visit to Planning and Zoning on May 2nd confirmed this request, and I was given a plat in reference to the request dated. The plat was done on 4/24/19, and it was given to me by Michaela. This property, prior to being purchased from Kentucky Bank by Rita Jones, was owned by myself and my wife, Shauna. These properties are part of an overall development plan designed to preserve and benefit an agricultural presence in the Scott County by utilizing the cluster ordinance and policies for residents and development outside the county's designated urban service boundaries. This ordinance allowed and led to the development of the Willowbrook cluster development and allowed an overall design for residential development on our farms, and in perspective allowed for the preservation of a farm entity without the cost of the county purchasing development rights toward protecting green space. In retrospect, the ordinance allows rural residential development, allows productivity on the set-aside property, and creates a very substantial tax base to the county and community. Our overall planning and design for the farm's development acquired the matching of a single-family residence with a dedicated development right, presently referenced as a dwelling right, as Matt pointed out, a dwelling unit, based on the relation of a 5 acre density into the number of acres on the farm tract. In addition, the preserved acreage in the ordinance at that time allowed this acreage to be a minimum of 25 acres, the preserved area, and retain a right for one residence on the 25 acre minimum preserve. Our plan, based on the availability of dwelling units, dedicated 1 unit to each preserved area. A short meeting with Charlie Perkins, counsel for P&Z at that time, way back when, and now, looks like
Would
Charlie.
you stop saying way back when?
Well, Charlie, it was, yeah, it was before 2000, it was way back then, I believe.
Oh, all right then.
Okay, and Charlie concurred that this description to the ordinance and approval of Willowbrook Sharp Farms Development was correct and applicable. Sean and I have met with the Willowbrook Homeowners Association from their invitation on Sunday evening, May 5th, which not too long ago. Through our introduction and discussion, we all agreed there may be some confusion between the farm and development, but we all agreed to protect our relationship, to share the area, and be supportive and protective to the maturity of the development and farm operation. We further agreed that precedence in this neighborhood and community is approved with investments made as a cluster development, and any continuance in development or division require county spec roads, septic, and utilities. I am sensitive to and realize Ms. Jones has made investment with properties that were formerly owned by us, John and Shauna Sharp. Mrs. Jones has messaged me on July 25th, 2018, wanting to know if I was interested in purchasing this property at the end of Willowbrook Lane. I have not met with her or discussed any purchase. I feel for the proximate community, we all need a better understanding toward the entitlements of the property, so we may discover the appropriate avenues to address the circumstance. And Coach, I'd be here on Thursday night.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp.
All right, thank you, Mark.
So we'll enter that, of course, into the record. Anybody else want to speak either on behalf of or against the Jones property? Please come up, state your name and address, and of course, then the mic's yours.
Good evening. My name is Jeremy DeWeese. I represent the Willowbrook Homeowners Association. We have been out there for quite a while. When we originally purchased the property, I think everybody was under understanding that there would be no more developing out there. There was a thought of a plan for a second phase, but we were under understanding that the development company went dissolved, so we didn't think there'd be anything more going on there. So we all bought into that subdivision thinking that was it. There's 20 houses and that was it. So we were kind of concerned about any more development out there. Of course, the county roads is a big concern. We also have some concerns as far as traffic, drainage, stuff like that. Really would like to see more of a plan before anything else happens, so we could put our hands around it, get a little bit better idea of what's going on.
Thank you, Mr. DeWeese. Just before we go on, because we'll have a few more people. For the record, Mr. Moran and Mr. Caldwell are absent today. Forgot to enter that into record. So somebody else would like to speak on our behalf of or against, please step up again, state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Sherry McMurray. I live at 107 Ashwood Circle, and I'll just say, in case anybody detects that I don't have an accent yet, we just moved here 2 years ago. We are very happily now Kentuckians. We're former Yankees from Minnesota, and absolutely are delighted to be here. Jeremy, just since we're newbies relatively, there's a couple that are newer than us, but and I am, by the way, the vice president of the HOA. When we bought this property, we understood clearly that development was it, the 20 homes was it. I don't know if any of you have been in that development, but I have not heard one person in our meetings indicate anything other than they want to be surrounded by agricultural land. They delight in it. That's one of the reasons we bought there. And we did understand that nothing that was under plow, and except for this year, that land has been under plow. We understood that that would remain undisturbed insofar as development was concerned. We have developed a lovely, lovely community that I would like to remind you pays a very high burden in taxes, even though it's only, quote unquote, 20 homes. I'd like to see the total, frankly. The proposed foresight plan, we have already talked about the roads, so I'm not going to go back over that. But there's no plan proposed. In other words, there's no apparent limits on building types, building sizes, domestic animals. There's no mention of keeping that we believe was the required tree line, or the fencing that we are required to pay half of the maintenance of with the, quote, farmer, not with 4 other landowners. Net, we have pages of limits on what we can do in that development, and there are no apparent limits on anything here other than a plat that gives me the willies. And frankly, this butts up at right in the backyard of at least 6 of our homes, ours being at the top of the cul-de-sac right in our backyard, and down Ashwood Circle to across Ashwood Circle onto Willowbrook Lane. So yes, we have a lot of trouble with this, and we would like to see a lot more detail before this gets approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McMurray. Anybody else here to speak? Yes, Mr. Sharp, please come on back up. Well, how about hold on?
Okay.
Right, we'll let everybody else speak, and then we'll come back to you.
Okay, that's fine.
All right, thank you, sir. Anybody else want to speak? Please, again, state your name and address for the record.
Jeff Hart, 100 Old Farm Road. We moved here 4 years ago. Well, 2014, I bought the corner house at Old Farm Road and Cane Run. I can tell you this for a fact, that Berkshire Hathaway would tell you, as part of the development, what they told us and sold us on the home was that 5 acre was part of the open space. Well, we know now that's being developed and a home going in. I know that the people that are developing it have said if we don't give them access to Old Farm Road, they'll put a pig farm in across there. I don't think that's the way to draw. I mean, we all need to get along. I don't think people should bully people like that. As far as development, it doesn't affect me as much as other people. It affects me more probably because I'm on the corner and there's so much traffic going in and going out. But I think what disturbs me about this whole process is we've had several meetings with the planning board, and everybody has a different answer. There's not a lot of firm what was done and what are the rules. I think maybe just in the future, we need to keep some better records or something.
And hopefully
because
we'll-
I still don't understand what is what. And I went and bought an expensive home, and other people are probably still getting information that is not correct.
Hopefully we'll get you a few answers tonight. I hope. Thank you, sir. Anybody else? I know oh, yes. Mr.
So I can understand these comments a little better. Do I understand this was set up as a cluster development?
Well, that was going to be my question once we heard everybody.
Okay.
I'm writing down some notes as well, so please, Mr. Wiseman, write them down because I've got a few questions myself.
I'm not real clear in my mind how this development lays with Willowbrook Estates. Do we have that map? Okay. And so, Mr. Hart, where was your property?
I'm on the corner right coming in at Cane Run, the first house.
Even further.
Yeah, he borders King Road.
But you're bringing everybody through my road.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
So this is Old Farm Road right here?
That's correct.
That's down here. And then Willowbrook comes off of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
But we're all part of the same neighborhood association.
Right. I know there was a young lady there who wanted to speak, please. You're welcome. I was raised right.
Yeah, I appreciate it. My name's Heather Sapp-Gooden. I am at 100 Willowbrook Lane. We built, my first husband and I built our house 12 and a half, almost 13 years ago. Right there at the corner of Willowbrook and Old Farm. At that time, we had to go through multiple revisions of our plan, of our exterior material in order to meet the requirements of the neighborhood. And at 29 years old, the reason I was willing to do that was because I wanted to build a home to raise my family and for my property value to continue to increase. Thanks to those restrictions, no goats in the backyard, no thrown up Ace Hardware shed, my property value has increased dramatically, and I'm very grateful for that. My concern, and I have a question and a concern. My first question is, what type of driveway material will be required of these 4 homes? Because all of us have side-facing garages. No one has a front-facing, and the driveway had to be a certain length. I don't have that in front of me, but we had to move our driveway as well. And I appreciate all of that. So I'm concerned about driveway material. Can you answer that? Is there going to be a restriction on that,
Mrs. Jones, we'll have her write those down, and I'll put it on here.
Fabulous.
So
Love it.
We'll get those questions to her.
Wonderful. So that is a question I have. Also about, like Ms. McMurray said, about the building material. We are all either masonry or hardy board. There is not any vinyl, not one single piece of vinyl in our entire neighborhood. In fact, I can remember when several houses were under construction, builders would put it up, and we would have it would be taken down within a week because... So we have all met all of the restrictions, as Mr. McMurray said, pages and pages of them, and I think are all enjoying our thriving county and the tax benefit that helps our county, and we are paying and happy to pay. My concern is my property value going down. Second concern, it is 20 houses. However, that's not just 20 cars. Many of us have teenagers. I know soon to be in this fall, we will have 4 vehicles at my house when my stepdaughter is there. So I want you to think about the traffic, and it doesn't sound like much, but it's busy, and I have a 5-year-old. So I'm concerned, especially where you said the road is more narrow than the current restriction or the current county plan. So that is a concern that I have as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else here, sir? Oh, go ahead. You want to speak? And ma'am, I'll have you up next, I promise.
Phil Weisenberger, 104 Willowbrook Lane. Just one concern I have, I guess, is how all of the lots in our neighborhood and all the surrounding neighborhoods have road front driveways that are all facing. These are all kind of coming together. If you think about Lancelot and Craigmore, our neighborhood, they're all, a driveway right off our property. I'd like to see more information about this plan before we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, your name again, please?
Phil Weisenberger.
Did you sign this?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
He'll add you on
Do you
there.
swear or affirm what you just said was the truth to the best of your information and belief?
Yes, sir.
Phil Weisenberger.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, go ahead as promised.
Good evening. My name is Sandra Dawkins. I'm also on the board of our homeowner association. I've lived in Willowbrook for 7 years and have followed the rules and regulations, and we have, as everybody has mentioned, pages and pages of CCRs. And it goes down to when we built our house, we literally had to change the whole plan, change the mirror of it, as far as our entrance in our driveway. Those are very important things, and I'm just really concerned that 5-acre lots don't have any limitations on what they can put on it. My understanding is that they could literally put a mobile home on a 5-acre lot, and that would not do anything reasonable to the value of our properties. We maintain them. We are very cohesive as a 20-member HOA, and we really appreciate what we have. We all enjoy living in Scott County, and it's just really important to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else here to speak against or in favor of? So I think we'll have Joe, if you want to come up. I figured I'd ask our Joe. We'll put Joe on the spot instead of Michaela. I've got a couple questions that hopefully will answer a few of the audience's questions. Conservation, was this property ever in a conservation zone based on a cluster development? 'Cause a lot of times cluster developments do always have the conservation land.
Preservation land.
Preservation, I'm sorry.
Conservation floodplain. This is
Yeah, preservation land where it will be maintained as preservation indefinitely. And that was, I know a few of you brought that point up, that it was supposed to have been or told or promised by a realtor. I'm not sure that it would be preservation land. So
Well,
did you
I
go?
mean, it would be preserved land for the cluster, and it would be restricted through the deed restrictions.
So there was no, this was never
Well,
under that?
I think this area was part of phase 2 of the cluster. So it received preliminary approval for phase 2 when they got their cluster approved. So in this area, they had cluster lots. So there were a number of 2-acre cluster lots here. So if this phase 2 was actually developed, there would have been 12, 15 or 16 cluster lots on this.
So potentially
park.
this
And then the
property
preserved
could
would have
have
been
16.
somewhere else. So this wasn't, it doesn't look like this was preserved area, was cluster lot area. So there would have been more lots. So there
And the
would have
way
been
this
10
is
more
being
lots.
divided up, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's 4 lots, which the maximum then could be placed would be 4 residences. Now granted, to I think this lady's point, it could be mobile homes, but it could also be beautiful homes. It really just depends on who buy these 5+ acre lots.
That would be a question for the developer, whether they'd be willing to restrict
We'll
the
ask
land.
Ms. Jones that in a second. So would this also, though, being that it's phase 2, would it not fall under the, I don't use big words, the HOA?
If it would have developed as a cluster, it would have. But it had preliminary approval for subdivisions, cluster subdivisions, or regular subdivisions. You get preliminary approval through the planning commission, then you have to actually construct it. So they would have had to construct the roads, put all the infrastructure in, and then plat the lots. And when they plat the lots for sale, that's when they restrict the preserved area by deed and by plat. So it never got to that phase. So all we have on record is a preliminary for phase 2. So it never took the next step to set aside preserved land or to develop the lots. So now it's still zoned A1. It still has a preliminary cluster on it, but it's been divided up now. So the farm that had the cluster and the preserved has been split. So it's
So
under
then it
two
wouldn't fall
owners
under
now. So
HOA.
it can't be developed as a cluster now. So
won't be-
now it's A1. If A1 allows 5-acre lots or a cluster if you have enough land, but 5-acre lots, it allows mobile homes. You just have to have 250 foot of width at the building line, 50-foot setbacks, and the 5 acre in the area. And you can have 3 on a private driveway. So there's no, if you have a 5 acre lot, the driveway can be gravel, but it has to be accessed. You can only have 3 on an access easement. Over 3, you gotta have county road access. So that's where the cul-de-sac comes in. You need the cul-de-sac because you're over 3. The owner can restrict these lots. Whether they have to be part of the HOA and meet the requirements of the HOA, I would recommend that they be part of it, but I don't know. Charlie could answer that question, whether you can require it. I don't
believe we can. If the original developer had finished it, and I'm not even sure, had the original developer done it by 5 acre tracts, we probably could have said include that too. But it's since been sold, and I mean, we don't have any prior restraint of any sort over this owner. This owner bought it, and basically it's A1 property, and she simply needs to comply with our A1 requirements, which this apparently does.
Driveway material, really, it could be either gravel or pavement. At this point, even though there's more than 3, we wouldn't require it be paved. It would be paved.
We
this is
wouldn't, the A1 lots, the road has to be paved. We'd probably require the apron to be paved off the county road.
But the driveway can be.
But the driveway itself.
There's no restrictions.
But I mean, I would try to get some clarification on whether there will be restrictions on this.
We'll ask that of Mrs. Jones here in a second. So HOA, 5 acre minimums, it could be building material, because it's not part of an HOA, we can't restrict what it's built. It could be a trailer, it could be a 5,000 square foot home. We have no right.
Our responsibility is lots have to be the right size, the setbacks have to be the right size.
Right.
They've got to have access to public transportation. All those things are our responsibility and our authority. We have absolutely zero authority to name building materials.
But the developer,
anything of that sort.
The developer can do those
The
things.
developer can do that, absolutely. And that's who always does it.
Yeah.
In the city, they now have where you have to stay in consistent with existing HOAs as part of I'm not even sure the county has that yet, but most developers, in fact, as far as I know, every developer's always done that. But we're talking here, a new developer who's come along and bought property that's not subject to that. That's entirely up. Obviously, we have the ability to talk to her about it, but we have no authority to require that.
Even though I had a lot of questions, that's all I have. Mr. Wiseman?
Back to this cluster development thing. You said these are 2 acre lots. There's 20 of them. That's 40 acres. So there had to be 60 acres set aside somewhere as part of that. Now, where is that 60 acres?
It was to the north, I think. It's
still
up
there.
and to the right. It's still there, but it's under separate ownership now. I think Mr.
So it
Sharp
has to be
owns that
kept,
property.
though, as can't be developed.
Well,
We're-
no. It does if you want to do the cluster. It can
And
be
not
developed.
set up as a cluster, so.
But it's not restricted yet because it's just got preliminary approval. They never went forward with the subdivision, so it's got a plat approval. So they could have moved forward with it without having to get planning commission's approval to build it, because they already got that with the preliminary. So with subdivisions, they have a preliminary plan. It's fairly detailed, but it gets approved by the planning commission. Then they have that entitlement, essentially. So they can build that subdivision tomorrow or 2 years from now or 5 years from now. But once they split it up, they can't do it anymore because there's no way they don't own the preserved land.
Charlie, let me ask you, and I think it'll hopefully add on or tack on to what Mr. Wiseman just asked. If we approve this way back when, the cluster, initially the 20 homes on 2 acre lots, give or take, should there not be a preservation land?
Well, I think there was one. Well, a couple of things. Yes, there would have been corresponding acreage, 3 acres for every 2 of each of these lots.
So 60.
And as they had continued on, then yes, that would have been there. That restriction would have been there. And the part that John and I talked about in most detail I believe at that time, we were requiring the preserved area to be in tracts of no less than 25 acres. And each one of those had to have a development or a dwelling unit. And my recollection agreed with John at the time, that's what we did, so I assumed this was part of the dedicated or the preserved area, and therefore would have had just the one dwelling unit, except it's not part of the preserved area for the 20 that are already there. It has its own preserved area. This would have had another area. All that's been broken up since. That's why it's no longer being, or can be done that way. So this being part of what was intended to be developed as clusters has got the maximum number of development units, which is 1 per 5 acres. So
Now,
22 some odd acres, they can have 4 lots.
I do see on the map south of this proposal, there is a preserved acreage, Willowbrook Estates, plat, cabinet 7, slide number 88. So do we know how many acres that is?
It's about 75, and that's the preserved area for the, for the existing cluster lots.
Okay, so that will in fact then state preservation.
Yes.
Okay, so the 60 acres or so, really more than that, is south, not north.
Yeah, for the
For these 20
For the 20.
Yeah. You can see, this is the plat that created the existing cluster lots. Here's Old Farm Road and here's Willowbrook Way. So these are the lots here. The preserved area for these lots is this large farm to the south. It's 75, 76 acres in size. This 22 acres that the application tonight is on was part of phase 2 that didn't develop or never had construction. Lots were never platted. The 22 acre lot was sold. The new owner would like to split that into 4 lots.
So instead of roughly 16, we may get a maximum of 4 additional buildings. It could be trailers, it could be houses. But then to the direct south, there is that 75 acres, which represents the preservation.
So this area is not part of the cluster, you might say. It is this plus all this down here is the cluster. 100 acres from which the 20 acres was
the cluster that was actually built and platted.
Okay, so this is totally separate back here?
It was phase 2. It still was part of the original intent was to develop this part too, but it wasn't.
So we're not violating the cluster if we approve this?
But we are.
Oh, you say we are?
Well, I think
You say we're not?
I think Mr. Sharp is saying that he intended this to be part of the cluster originally. So that's why he's saying you violated, but I mean legally, no, you're not, because it was never developed. This part was never developed.
So if
I would recommend if you approve this that you rescind the previous phase 2 approval, that this would override it if you do approve these 4 lots, because I mean, at this time, you approved a preliminary, it was good forever to develop. We passed a sunset clause in 2014 because of situations like this, so that if it's not developed in 2 years, it goes away. This predates the sunset clause. So.
Any other questions for Joe?
So if phase 2 had been developed as a cluster, they would have had to have had additional preserved land up above the 75 that we have now.
Right.
And so is that land available?
No, Rita Jones owns this, and Mr. Sharp owns the area that was going to be the preserved for this. I mean, so I guess technically,
but that was your intent.
But
that was the intent there. So.
Right.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Unless anybody else has questions. You're welcome, Miss Michaela, for letting you off the hook. Mrs. Jones, please.
Hopefully I can clear up some issues. I bought this in 2012 when John lost it to Kentucky Bank, and I bought it from them. And I have farmed it all these years, getting to the point of life where tired of farming so much, so trying to cut back somewhat. But I do intend to be a good neighbor. I'm not part of Willowbrook. I bought 22 acres. The deed had no restrictions. It has the 4 building lots available, as I understand. I will have a minimum square footage of 1,800 for the houses. There won't be any double wides or single wides allowed. They are 5-acre lots, so if they want to have chickens, I guess maybe they'll have chickens. But I'm open to suggestions. Again, I'm not part of Willowbrook. I've not been invited to be part of Willowbrook. It will be blacktop, meet county road standards, back through a cul-de-sac, and that's all I know.
Thank you, Mrs. Jones.
What about the driveways themselves?
The driveways themselves, I assume, will be up to the person who buys the 5-acre tract. I wouldn't doubt that some of them will want gravel, because if you'll notice, you don't have that one up right now. But that E3, he goes way back before he gets to his building lines.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be up to those people. They're not going to be cheap lots, and hopefully not cheap houses, of course. We want to keep the value of the properties out there as best we can. But I would think with 5 acres, well, on that long of a driveway, he would want gravel. I would rather not restrict that.
Thank you.
But it lays so far back, I don't think that would affect any of the Willowbrook people. And as far as drainage, this all drains away from Willowbrook. Willowbrook is kind of on top of the ridge, and this is in behind it.
Any
And
other
I'll be-
questions for Mrs. Jones?
I'll be glad to answer any other questions I
Other
can.
commission, any questions?
My question would be, is it possible to put the same restrictions on these 4 lots as the Willowbrook HOA, or?
I've never been advised what those restrictions are.
I don't know if it would be beneficial, to you in selling the lots to keep a.
Charlie,
some
could
kinda keep
I think
continuity
there's,
with-
Steve, might be a little too restrictive, because like the driveways all have to be blacktop, and the garages, from what I'm hearing tonight, have to be situated so-and-so. These are 5-acre lots. They're not 2-acre lots.
Charlie, if we were to approve this, could we ask for a deed restriction that mobile homes do not go under if Mrs. Jones
she volunteered.
would be?
I've
yes,
already
she
agreed to
volunteered.
that.
She could stipulate that, and we could recognize the stipulate. We could not
We could-
ask for that.
Okay, so she's.
But we can certainly recognize her
offered it.
stipulation.
Okay,
As part of her, in effect, as part of her proposal.
so her proposal, minimum 18 square hundred.
And even with that, I probably should add, we've never been sued over that. We've done that before, and it's always worked. So my suggestion is, she proposes that as part of her application. We approve it as the total package, and then hopefully she won't come back and sue us and say, wait a minute, they didn't have the authority to include that as part of the package.
So we would just take her offering as a,
As a stipulation, as part of her package, and we'd approve it.
no mobile homes and minimum 1,800 square
Right.
foot. Okay. Any other questions for Mrs. Jones? And we'll have you up here in a second.
Would you like a copy of the restrictions? I've got one here.
I would be glad
All right.
to look at those.
Thank you,
As I
Mrs.
said,
Jones, and I
I
think we've
plan
got
on
a bunch
being
of
a-
questions for you, or a couple more anyway.
I plan on
so-
being a good neighbor, but I haven't had time to review these.
Okay.
So I don't know how restrictive they are. They sounded fairly restrictive. Okay. Okay.
All right. If you want to come up and thank you, Mrs. Jones,
Thank
and
you.
we'll have probably a couple more questions for you, and may have you back up here in a second. Mr. Sharp?
Thank you, Mark. Frank, you're trying to make good points. James, I know you're an old ag guy, and Stephen, I know you are. So what's going on here is Rita does not have the right to take my development rights and put on that property. That the way it is, when the parent tract started in development, you've got so many development rights on a parent tract of land. Okay, if it's 100, you've got 20. Okay, so there's 21. There's out there in the area we had 280 acres, so we could do a subdivision of 56 1-acre lots. And so the good thing about it, I mean, these are great people, and we all get along, don't we? and we get along much better all the time. So the fact is the subdivision wouldn't exist without the farm, and the farm would not exist without the subdivision. And so we've got used to this out there, and these people are used to a 2,000-pound bull being in their yard, and it's part of the core out there, isn't it, Miss Heather? Heather runs cows all the time for us. Okay, but the soybeans and corn belong to Rita. Okay, so that's right, I understand. So in the area out there is like back in the old days that Rita and I could go back there and develop the rest of that property. Okay, so what you're missing is, like, when you look at the total thing, we're not talking about 2 acres back in the day. I think most of your lots are like 1 to 1.3, or nothing's over 1.3, I don't believe. So anyway, so the set aside on our farm came from 75 acres. Now, what Charlie and I discussed and what was done, we left enough development rights from not to do 25 1 acres, but do the 20, and kept the others for the preservation area, that dedicated 1 to every 25 acre tract, so my son can do something with it in the future. It's not barren. It can have his house on it on a 25 acre tract. This is all great, and it's done 20 years ago. Okay, I don't think a whole lot's changed since then. But from the parent tract that I dedicated over, is that there's no dedicated rights to that property. It doesn't exist. They're eaten up on the 20 acre lots and on the preserved lots. So what Rita has, and that's what I'm trying to tell you, I'm sensitive there, and things can be worked out between Rita and the Sharp Farms and Willowbrook. But I don't think you can pass anything legally, because legally she does not have any development rights. That's less than 25 acres. That's 22 acres. It doesn't deserve one of our development rights to put a house on it. And so from the original tract of land, with clusters and preservation, there are no development rights for that property. And that's what I'm trying to tell you all. It doesn't exist. I've given them to where they go. And so to come in here and say that that can be done, that's farm. That is a farm. Unless that we go back and look at the major cluster, and up front where it's already paved or whatever, that was all dedicated clusters. It just didn't have to at that one time whatever. And so Rita she owns 5 acres in the front. Our confusion when we met the other day was, who owns the acres around the 5 acre tract? I do. I think I can prove that to everybody. But it's back in the old tract before the final subdivision plat, we sold it from the bank to the Willowbrook developers, whatever, but all that had to go back to the parent tract. So it's all there. I don't think we can do anything tonight. I like to help out this situation and this situation, but I want to farm, and he does too. And the other son's out there full-time farming. And we get so restricted. And the other thing that I've sat in your all seats and I can charge you with is in our area, Willowbrook and Sharp Farms, we have set precedents out there, even with Lancelot and Belvedere and Craigmore. I'm just surrounded by subdivisions. That's why you have to let your hair down, because we just keep getting restricted out there. And so this was our only battle to try to do the cluster. And you know, James, or you guys were around, I fought like hell to get that done, because it's just a swap off. Okay, so and we've all accepted it, and I think we all really think it's appreciative of each other that we've done it. But this just can't exist. From the parent tract, there's not enough development rights to go with this. And that's my issue, and we need to sit down and explain it and walk through it. And the history about it is as you well know, the preliminary says that you and I can do whatever out there, based on what we've got going on. It doesn't go away. And so that's why I've invited these people. You know, I want their input. You know, this county just keeps restricted and pressuring whatever. But in that area out there, we have set precedents that it's a cluster subdivision. You either got 1 acre or 2 acre, whatever cluster is, plus the set aside. There is no room for 5 acre tracts on what we did 20 years ago. It's either a cluster subdivision or it's preservation on our property. This was our property. And we made that in law. And he should have a development right on a 25 acre tract of land that Charlie and I know exists to do what he wants to with as far as living out there. Probably with the Willowbrook restrictions though, because they're good. And we took time when we built that out there so that we didn't want anything to turn south and be ugly or whatever. And you guys did not have to build those big homes. You could have built less homes out there, you know, smaller. However, Jim and me. So it's something that, you know, that I put on paper, that we walked through, that these people may turn out great. They built the big homes out there. I don't know of a nicer place in Scott County. But I think we need to work through the situation as far as what's out there. You don't have the right to give her my development rights. It's set in stone, and they're out there. And we need to sit down and have a discussion and place those where they need to be and make sure everybody's agreeing on what needs to be done out there, and not leave Rita out either. So I don't think you can vote, because, but in my charges to the commission is we've set precedents of what's in that area out there, which is what planning and zoning is about as far as 1 acre tracts and preservation. We don't have room for 5 acres.
Where
I think
is this,
we get into it, we'll find out.
where is this recorded, or where is it in the?
Where's what recorded? The parent tract of land?
No, I mean, as far as that there was never a building credit to go with this 22 acres.
Okay. If there's a 100-acre tract of land up there, and that's what we own on when we made that purchase, okay, and we give 20 of them away, okay, then the set aside's there. Steve, that's just, we can't have more. We can't say there's 32 development rights out there on a 140-acre tract of land. It doesn't work that way. The math has to be right. And then when you look at it, I'm the guy that dictates what happened back in the day. Not Rita's purchase from the bank when they knew there weren't any development rights out there. We didn't tell her to go buy that or anything. She just bought it. And she's been farming it. And what happened there is she didn't have anything to go with it because she couldn't purchase any more land, whatever. So this is the last ditch. These people didn't want her in on a 5-acre tract. But I think we can resolve a lot of things here and kind of work through something.
Mr.
But
Perkins,
you can't
is that
create something that's not there.
correct in what Mr. Sharp is saying, that
I think it's correct.
development rights cannot be transferred over?
I think it's, well, but they are. I'm not talking about this situation, but no, they can be, because when we do the cluster, I mean, for example, we limited it to a 25-acre minimum parcel, whether that was let's say it was 100 acres of preserved land, then they could have had 4 parcels, 25 each, and only 1 dwelling unit each. So we were exchanging them in just doing that. What I don't understand here is, according to the plats that we've got, the rest of the farm and the part that Rita bought is not part of the reserve, at least not until the second phase had been developed.
No, Charlie.
Well, wait a minute. Let me just finish this, and then you can correct me.
All right.
So if the total had been developed and the total preserved as it was required then was preserved and reserved, there may have been no others, and those 25-acre increments or 50-acre increments, whatever they were, may have had just 1 each. And so if somebody tried to come in later, when be it a bank or somebody else had forgotten just how that was supposed to be done, then they may well have thought they were buying more than what was there. But it wasn't completed, and according to our plats at least, what was it, south or wherever the reserve part is, this is not what Rita bought. If Rita bought A1 land without that preservation overlay, then she got just like anybody else has A1 land, and that is it's got 1 development per 5 acres. And she got 22 acres, so she's got 4 of them. Now, if it was part of a final plat, then I would totally agree with John. But I don't think that's it, at least not according to our records, which I think are better than maybe you think they are, because we've got the final plats.
Okay, but Frank, James, Steve, and Charles probably, I don't know if the rest of you, but I've got to lean on you a little bit. When you have a tract of land, okay, and you're talking about TDRs to build a subdivision, there's a density there. For 100 acres, you get 20. Okay, all right. Now, what this does, her co-worker tract is saying that my parent tract of land could give 24 away. No, I can only give 20 away. We can't create something that's not there. Those have been dedicated back in the day. I mean, we can go down, sit down, and we can prove it. If I have to go to court, I can prove it. But I hope that's silly. However, there's something to be done out there that we can work out, because in the area, what Charlie's confused on, not confused, Charlie, you're never confused, but.
Yeah, sure, right.
Okay, but but when we did the second phase, the first phase was dedicated from this side, the left side of the farm next to Lancelot. The other side was dedicated, would have come from my home place, which would have been 2 different parent tracts of land to do the second phase. Rita's would have come from the home place. That never happened. Those never got dedicated. So you can't create something that's not there. That from the parent tract on Willowbrook 1, we dedicated that land. Willowbrook 2 would have been dedicated from the other property, 2 different parent tracts of land that we owned and bought at certain times, and we can't create more than's out there. Am I making a little bit of sense? Okay.
Well, actually, you're making good sense, except the conclusion doesn't seem to follow. If this all came from the home place,
It did. Yeah. The home place never was touched, and second phase never was touched.
I thought you said this came from the home place, and Willowbrook
No,
2
saying-
would have come from the
No,
home
Willowbrook
place.
2 would have come from the home place.
Okay.
So Willowbrook 1 got dedicated, and those rights are gone to these people.
Well, and there's a reserved property to cover that, to give you the
No
5-acre
development
density.
rights on it.
Right.
She's got less than 25-acre tract. Okay.
But that's not part of the reserved area.
Okay, Charlie, but the rights are gone.
Where'd they go?
They use 20
Twen-
for 100 acres.
I mean, if you use 20 for 100 acres, then you've got 80 of reserve.
Okay, so what's the question to how big the parent tract was? And plus, don't forget our 25.
Your parent tract was bigger than 100 acres.
How do you know? How does she know? Who knows?
Because you couldn't have a 20 lot cluster if you had less than 100 acres.
Okay.
Because it's a 5 acre density requirement.
So Willowbrook's 25 acres total, 75 acres is there, that's 100 acres.
That's 100.
Now, why can you take something from me on the other side of the farm and give away that I own? It's all about the development right to do a cluster in the first place.
Right.
The density has to be there on the parent tracts of land.
If she
If
was,
it's more than, we can't do it.
if she was gonna do a cluster, you're right, but she's not doing a cluster.
She doesn't have any rights on that property to build a house.
Is that recorded when
It's
it's
not
in the back?
recorded, but the parent tract has only got so many to it.
Charlie, is this something you think you may need to research a little bit before we make a decision today, possibly requiring a continuance?
Well, as I said, there's just a jump. I mean, John may be right. I'm not going to sit here and say I know I'm right and I know he's wrong. But according to the plats, the only preserved areas are designated. Rita's area is not part of a preserved. It's A1, therefore it's 1 per 5. And that's the case with any A1 land anywhere in the county. So that's why I don't see how you get from there to you can't take what isn't there. Well, there's 5 acres that's not restricted, therefore, or 22 acres that's not restricted, therefore it is there. Because it's 1 in 5 is what it's been since county adopted zoning in 1970.
And of course, it would have to meet the minimum of 5 acre lots
Yes.
And we approve lots this size
all the time.
Mr. Sharp, why do you say you have something equivalent to a PDR or something on this land?
Yeah, total development.
Why do you
right
think
there,
that?
property.
Why do you say that?
Why did I say that?
Why do you say you have the right to have this restriction on this land?
Why is there a right on this restriction on
Yeah.
land?
It's a parent
Because
tract.
phase 2, what didn't happen, the land from my mother's property wasn't dedicated over to that, so therefore there's no TDRs on that 22 acre tract of land. It's not there. Chick, you understand what I'm saying?
I understand that, but she's not trying to develop it as a cluster where she would need.
She has to have a development right in order to develop a 5 acre tract of land also.
All I know is I bought it from Kentucky Bank. They assured me there was 4 development rights with it, and it's an A2, and it's all, the plats all show that it would have been 16 lots instead of 4 if it had ever been developed as a cluster. And you had much more traffic on your streets, et cetera, et cetera. et
But
cetera.
with a cluster, you would also need preserved land, which you don't have.
Right, which I don't have, so
Right.
that's why I'm doing the 4 5s.
Which makes sense.
Mark, I don't want to sue you people, but those development rights don't exist on that 22 acre tract of land.
I have nothing in a deed that restricts anything.
Charlie, what are your thoughts about having development rights, not having development rights? As a commission,
The only way those rights go away, to my understanding, is if they are part of a cluster development and they're either inside the lots or they're inside the reserved area.
which neither of those.
Which this does not appear to be. The only cluster out there, they've got their 20 and they've got their reserve. This is not part of that.
Can we rescind this?
Regina just asked the question, which it's a great question, I wish the law provided a great answer. If we were to find out subsequently that this is incorrect, could we rescind it? Well, you can't rescind a plat unless you get the sign-off of all the owners. I bet Rita wouldn't want to sign off on such a deal. And the statutes just simply don't provide some other way. We'd end up in court over that if we did that. But my problem is, and I just wish I could see the point, because if it's not restricted in the record from our actions previously, then I don't see how it's restricted at all. It's just like any other 5 acre, A1 tract that can be developed into 5 acre tracts. We've got them all over the place. So I just simply cannot see that last jump that John makes.
More effort, okay, because this is simple to me, because I did all the thing out there, and wrote the ordinance and did everything as far as development rights. The second phase, where Reed's property is, those rights, there was no rights there. They were, that tract of land was used up to do this one, okay? To do the second one, they had come off another tract of land, okay, to do the 16 whatever. We never dedicated those things over, and that never happened. So on the parent tract of land where her property exists, those development rights are eaten up between this area and the preserved area. They're not there. Scott Winkley owns 2 development rights. We sold him 11 acres of land. Rita's property up front has 1 development right. Over on the other side, it had 1 development right. You can't create development rights to keep doing land. There's a limit to it. Our limit on that property is gone.
It's 20.
It can't go against her land. It doesn't exist out there. Her land is less than 25. It can't. It's agriculture. Period. There's no right from the parent tract to go with that.
Any of the commissioners have either thoughts or
So you can, on her tract of land, she can build one house or no house?
No, because see, back in she didn't have the
Because it
25
wasn't
acre ordinance.
25 acres you was referring to your
And
son
so
to.
the development rights from parent tract of land are gone. Okay, and so she's trying to create 4 acres
For
development rights
come from out of the sky. And if she takes any, she's taken from the parent tract of land on the other side. It was dedicated second phase, and we never dedicated. That's on another
Mr.
tract
Mifflin,
of
did you
parent
have a
tract. It
question?
doesn't go to this property. This property's on this part of the land. I mean,
Mr. Sharp has made a statement that he was willing to sit down and talk with Ms. Jones and with the Homeowners Association, and we have some doubt between Mr. Sharp and Mr. Perkins about what is legally binding, and so therefore I'm going to make a motion to table this tonight and give all these parties time to look everything over and talk about it and bring it back to us at another time.
So we have a motion by Mr. Mifflin.
Could we say just to continue this? Because to
continue?
table it means you
Continue.
didn't have to have motions to take it off the table, and that
Okay.
has requirements, and I'd rather not
I
have
will
to.
change that to continue.
So we don't need a
Yes.
motion or a vote?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Motion is
So
still
motion,
fine.
motion by Mr. Mifflin,
Sorry.
seconded by Mr. Vest. All in favor to continue this till next month, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay.
Yes.
Or till they get it
No.
resolved. It may take
So,
more than
yeah,
a
so it
month.
may take a
and Mark,
month or
we'll
two.
try to bring clarification. I mean, Charlie, we'll work on this.
Yeah.
The parties will.
I don't know, I might
Thank
take a
you, Charlie. That
vacation.
makes
I
sense.
don't
So it's continued, so we can move on to the next one. Thank you, everybody. Next one on the agenda is, no, we're gonna hear Marlon. We are gonna hear, right?
No, we're not in here.
No, Marlon was continued.
Charlie continued.
Icabana. So next, if you have conversations, please take them out into the hallway. Next one we're gonna hear is PDP 2019-19 100 Icabana Drive. Preliminary development plan for. Hang on. Let's clear the room out. Take the conversation home. I do need a hammer. All right, Joe, I need a hammer for next meeting. So you need to get me one. I think somebody said we need a couple-minute break. Somebody need a break?
No, just to clear it out there. Looks like it.
All right, let's go. PDP 2019-19 100 Icabana Drive preliminary development plan for a 15,929 square foot retail building located at 100 Icabana Drive. Because Marland Farm, the previous one, was in fact continued, right?
Yes.
I believe so.
Yeah, that's what I have on record. Continued. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah. As you mentioned, this is a preliminary development plan. For those of you who may not be familiar, there is an existing, I guess, there was a restaurant on the site. It's since closed, and they're looking to redevelop this site with a building that'll be just under 16,000 square feet. It's located at 100 Icabana Drive. It has a B5 zoning, which is our general commercial park zoning district, and the properties that surround it are zoned either B2, which is highway commercial, or B5, which, as I mentioned, is general commercial park. The lot is a little over 1 3/4 acres in size. It has 2 access points for vehicular access. Those are both off of Ikebana Drive. For the type of retail that they're proposing, or subdivision and development regulations require 40 parking spaces. The applicant's looking to reuse as much of the existing parking lot as they can. So, you know, the restaurant required more parking spaces than their proposed use would. So that's why they're proposing 92 parking spaces, for which are handicap accessible. This is the zoning of the zoning map for the property. So you can see Connector Road down here to the south. Here's Blossom Park Drive and Ikebana Drive. And then I've outlined the property here in blue. So you can see it is Zone B5. This property here is all Zone B2, which is highway commercial, as I mentioned. And then you get into the Cherry Blossom townhomes as you get further down Ikebana Drive. And that's all zoned R2, which is a medium density residential. Looking at an aerial of the site, and this isn't, my box that I drew on here isn't 100% exact. I kind of, it's an approximation of where the property lines are. But you can see there's the existing restaurant. There's an existing entrance to it here from Ikebana Drive, and then there's another existing entrance here. Off-site, there is a third entrance, and this parking lot all connects. So, I mean, there are 3 entrances that could be used for the site. It's just that only 2 are on the property itself. So here's a look at their preliminary development plan. You know, so as I mentioned, here's the 15,929 square foot building that they're proposing. Here's the entrance that's closer to Blossom Park Drive. Here's the entrance that's a little bit further down. And as you can see, there's parking proposed around the building itself. As far as the performance standards for the B5 zoning district, it meets all of them with the exception of one, and that being that since this property line here to the south is the periphery of the B5 zone, there's a 50-foot setback that's required along that property line, and that's greater than the 20-foot rear yard setback that we would typically see. And the purpose there is that, you know, we want a little bit of extra buffer in case the zoning district abuts residential property or things like that. In this case, the property to the south is zoned highway commercial, and as such, you know, staff doesn't really have any issue with allowing them to reduce that setback from 50 feet to 41 feet. It's not a very large variance that's being requested, and it is to a high intensity commercial district. As far as other requirements for pedestrian access, there is an existing sidewalk that runs along both Blossom Park Drive and Ikebana Drive, so there is adequate pedestrian circulation or opportunity for pedestrian circulation. As far as landscaping requirements, they are looking to preserve as much of the existing landscaping as they can. So much of the landscaping that exists around the border will in fact remain. Their proposal meets all of our landscaping requirements, sort of with the exception of this eastern property line. Typically, for a parking lot that adjoins any other property, we would ask for a 5-foot landscaping buffer with trees and shrubs. Given that this property, I guess in its current configuration, this parking lot extends to the east onto the neighboring property, it doesn't seem appropriate to require them to, you know, install a curb and some landscaping just to screen it from that. It would also sort of reduce the ability for there to be cross flow between the 2 properties, especially once the neighboring property develops. And then in addition to that, there are some landscape islands that are currently existing, as you see here. And I mean, outside of the drive aisles between the parking spaces, that acts as a sort of a visual barrier between the 2 properties. So I'm recommending also that we grant them a waiver to the screening that we would typically require along that eastern property line. Their proposal meets our canopy requirements and our interior landscaping requirements as far as parking islands and trees and that sort of thing. And overall, I am recommending approval of this application. I have the variance and the waiver that I mentioned earlier listed there, and then there are 5 conditions of approval. that I'm recommending be attached to this as well. All 5 of which are standard for preliminary development plans. You know, things like abiding by our zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations. You know, letting the applicant know that the preliminary approval is good for a period of 2 years and that sort of thing.
Thank you. Any questions for Matthew? Okay, thank you, Matthew. The application or applicant would like to speak. Please come up. State your name for the record.
Yes, Mike Hill. I'm a planner with Land Design and Development, 503 Washburn Avenue, Louisville, 40222. As Matt mentioned, and I'll be brief because he did a very good, thorough job presenting the case. This is a redevelopment of the previous Golden Corral restaurant site on Ikebana. The goal is to utilize the existing features as much as possible with regard to access to the site, the parking on the site, infrastructure, utilities, landscaping, etc. We simply desire to remove the existing structure and build a new structure for a retail user in basically the same place where the restaurant structure was. Page down. Oh, there we go. So Matt already went over the zoning, so I won't touch on it, but we are completely surrounded by a commercial. This is our site plan overlaid on an aerial, so you can see how it fits in with the adjacent commercial properties around us. Ikebana to the north, Blossom Park Drive to the west, and then this is our site plan. So all the trees you see along the perimeter of the street are existing. They will be preserved. The tree line in the rear, the plan is to preserve that as much as possible. There are some new trees along the right property line that Matt mentioned to kind of create that visual buffer adjacent to the property to the east. And then as a comparison, it's a little dark in here, but the top of the slide shows a recent aerial photo of the existing Golden Corral restaurant. The white is the footprint of that restaurant building. And then the bottom portion of the slide, for comparison's sake, is our new proposed retail development plan, with the tan color being our new building footprint. Again, really the only change in the plan is the user going from restaurant to retail, and the structure itself being removed and replaced with a newer structure that will better serve the intended retail user. Happy to answer any questions if anyone has any. We're happy about this project. We think it's a good redevelopment of a vacant site. So we think it's a good fit for this area.
I do have one, and I think it'll be an easily answered question. So required parking spaces is 40. You have 92, with the setback being reduced from 50 feet to 41. If I remember correctly, unfortunately, I did go eat at Golden Corral quite a bit. Those front parking spots are pretty tight. I mean, is it going to eliminate those front parking spots, which would be to the west of the building?
By front, which are you speaking facing?
Be to the
Ikebana?
left of the tan building or orange building.
To the left.
Which would be the on Blossom, basically right next to Blossom Park Drive.
No, we're not proposing to
But
eliminate.
you're taking away 9 feet. Again, I'm just doing this from memory. I thought it was pretty tight. Those probably only 10 spots, so again, it won't make a difference. It still meets the required spots.
Yes, yeah. The goal is to utilize the existing parking lot as much as possible. There may be some restriping that's necessary around the building. So, we'll.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Hill? Thank you, Mr. Hill.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, we did have some people who had some questions, so please come up, state your name and your address, please, for the record.
My name is Bill Keller. I live at 132 Sunningdale Drive in the Cherry Blossom development. I'm also the owner of the Burger King on Connector Road. So I do know a little bit about the traffic patterns on it. First and foremost, that was a Golden Corral that did not have any ingress into the neighborhood that's directly behind them right now, which is the townhomes of Cherry Blossom. That road in Ikebana was not developed at the time. And now when you look at the plan, and this goes to the whole development plan on Connector Road and Blossom Park, you're looking at another 250 homes that are back in there that now have ingress and egress past this restaurant or the new retail development that's going to have 92 parking stalls, 16,000 square feet minus 71 for retail, which isn't there for hours and hours. They're in and out type of situation, and we're creating another traffic issue on that intersection. The driveway is not being moved that goes into it. It was fine that the driveway was there initially with the Encabana being dead-ended before you went into Cherry Blossom Townhomes, but with that being connected, that driveway hasn't been moved at all. It is within 10 feet of that intersection, if I recall correctly. Mark, you probably know it better than I do.
Yes,
but it's
sir.
about 10 feet. And I would be hard-pressed to say that a car could leave there left and not get hit with all the traffic that's going to go on in Cabana. So that's the number one issue. That intersection with that driveway right there needs to be a right turn only, or reduce, take it out completely and go to the back entrance. That would be my suggestion. Secondarily, this thing was all plotted without looking at all the impact of Planet Fitness, the hotel that's going in, the other road that's going in from what I call Oxford Road. And we've got, I don't know how many thousands of cars or hundreds of cars that are now going to be right at that little intersection of Blossom Park Drive and Connector Road. I'm sure the old traffic study doesn't have any of that in there. So what I'm trying to tell you is I use that entrance every day. And sometimes I know what hours not to go by that entrance, and it is literally somebody's waiting to have an accident. Fortunately, what I've seen today or most of the time is just fender benders, but when there's a fatality there, just remember that you guys pass this thing without thinking about what's the big picture of that neighborhood. How many cars are going through that intersection from Planet Fitness, the hotel, the Encabana townhomes back in Cherry Blossom back there, and the neighborhoods that adjoin it. Right now, Cherry Blossom has two entrances. We come out of Blossom Park, or we come out of Clubhouse Drive. That's all we got. And we put all this retail there, plus the Planet Fitness, plus this, plus that, and we know that there was 22 acres back in that area. I know the hotel's not using them all, and I know Planet Fitness isn't using them all, but the reality is it's going to be retail some point too, or hotels. What do we do with the traffic? We're asking for trouble. So please consider, one, moving the driveway entrance into this retail thing and moving it back so that it's not right on top of that intersection, so that somebody taking a left out of the retail doesn't get T-boned by a car that's going home. And number two, reconsider what we're doing with that intersection for long-term traffic planning. And I know everybody's going to tell me that's a state highway. Let me tell you something. This planning commission can say, we need the light and we want it now. Even if it only runs during the daytime and you turn it off at night after 8 o'clock and it's a blinking red or something like that. At least then during the normal hours, it works. And maybe it keeps the traffic flow down and nobody gets killed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keller. Anyone else, sir? I promise we'll get to everybody.
I got in a little late.
You swear or affirm what you're about to say to be the truth, to the best of your information and belief?
I do. My name is Neil Thompson. I live at 108 Spyglass Drive, which is the first street once you get into Cherry Blossom on the right. So I get to look at the building of Planet Fitness.
Excuse me, I was
last
concentrating on your address. What's your name again?
Neil Thompson. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
So I was here last year to speak on the behalf of the neighborhood when the Planet Fitness was going in. And I remember the traffic study because the state was here for that. And it got an F before anything was even built there. There was nothing there. Right there at Blossom Park and Connector Road got an F. Everything got approved for Planet Fitness with that F, with the agreements that they're going to put a little side road in to connect Blossom Park to Old Oxford, which is going to make things 10 times worse. That is the worst thing that could have happened because people already cut through Valvoline when they're on Old Oxford to get onto Blossom Park Because if you come all the way down to Old Oxford, there's no way you're going to turn anywhere because the stoplight is literally 5 feet away from you. So all it's going to do is back up traffic even more into Cherry Blossom to go along with the Toyota people every day that cut through there, through the neighborhood to get to Toyota because traffic is so backed up on Connector Road. So now when the Planet Fitness, which hasn't been built yet, is in the process, and then we're going to put something else in there now along with the townhomes like this gentleman was talking about. I mean, where's this traffic going to go? And somebody will die at that intersection. I can promise you that. I drive it every day, 5 or 6 times a day, in and out of there. I know Mark works at the Kentucky Bank there. It's a terrible place to have to pull in and out of, between Starbucks on the other side and the gas station, people making left-hand turns across traffic, and people just want to sweep it under the rug like there's nothing we can do about it. You can wait until something gets done on Connector Road before anything else gets approved to go in this area, because you're just pigeonholing the citizens and the residents of that neighborhood, because we have no other way to get out. There's another, you can go all the way through the neighborhood and get out, but then you have to turn onto the bypass, a left-hand turn onto the bypass during rush hour. Someone's going to die there too. I mean, there's nothing they can do. The state already said they're not going to put a stoplight there because it's too close to the other one. So we have to wait before anything else goes in there, before something happens with Connector Road. It has to, I don't know, but I don't know what you can do to it. You know, do you block the entrance to Starbucks and make them come in down at the stoplight where the Mexican restaurant is? I mean, and they're going to fight that and not let that happen because it's going to keep people from there. But it's bad there, and I think it would be terrible idea to put something in there right now. It already had an F before anything was even there when we had this discussion for the Planet Fitness. It was an F, and there's nothing you can get worse than that. And the townhomes, and like this gentleman said, if you try to make a left-hand turn out of that first entrance of Golden Corral, you're at the stop sign. I don't even think you can make a left-hand turn and be at the stop sign. So traffic, and there's no stop sign there coming into the neighborhood once you get in there. So traffic's going to be zooming by. It's going to be coming in. It's just a bad spot that needs to be looked at. So please consider that before you. You know, I know they have the right to develop it. You know, it's their property, but you're pigeonholing the neighborhood if you continue to allow stuff to be built there at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I was going to say, I've seen a bunch of hands. Please come on up one at a time and state your name and address. And
Pardon? I'm Patricia Fan, and I'm president of the Cherry Blossom Village Homeowners Association. I live at 103 Burkdale Drive. Neil's correct. I think we sat here about a year or so ago and listened to the man from the State Transportation Department who said pretty much until somebody gets killed at that intersection, they will not put a light up. So I think it's somehow we've got to be able to pressure those people. My question is for this Mr. Hill is, what kind of retail business is this?
I'll be happy to ask it.
yeah, we'll let him answer it at the end.
That's our question. What kind of retail business is it? The ladies are hoping for a clothing store, but I've heard that it's going to be another tool store. And I realize I'm in a room full of mostly men tonight. Have no problem with the tool store, except right around the corner is Lowe's.
Sure.
So I'm curious as to what it is you're putting in there that's going to create all this traffic. And I can share Bill's concern and the entire neighborhood's concern about all the traffic. I came here tonight because I'm tired of hearing Russia. So I thought I'd come talk about traffic, because it is. It's an accident waiting to happen. And I know, and we all keep saying Mark works right there at the bank. He sees it.
Oh, I see it every day, and I'll touch on it after we get all the questions.
But we just want you to know we are all concerned about what it is going to do to our neighborhood and our property values when people race through Blossom Park right now when they're late going to Toyota. It's like a drag strip through there between 4 and 5 o'clock at night, and so we just want to share our concerns with you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fannin. Next person to come up and speak. Anybody else want to come up and speak, please?
I'm Mark Webb, 131. I'm not really going to add anything new to any of this. I'm just here to say traffic is bad. When Golden Corral was there, again, the townhomes that Bill talked about weren't there. The Planet Fitness wasn't going in. So, and I know you're also tabling or withdrawing the exits out the back of the neighborhood for Cherry Blossom as well. That we're gonna go back to Old Oxford Road, so it still just leaves the two ways in and out of there. So with whatever goes there, it's just gonna compound the problem for traffic.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Anybody else want to speak either against or for? Any other questions? I do, and I'll state, I was taking some notes, so we'll get Mr. Hill to come back up. With regards to traffic lights, I know Mr. Thompson was here last time. I think Mrs. Fannin was here. I would love to have a traffic light being the manager of Kentucky Bank. And I called the State Department of Transportation gentleman here when he was here to speak about the traffic that was going to come with the fitness place. And I called him out and said, we want a traffic light. He said it isn't called for or recommended at this point. And I know I said, for the record, it's going to take somebody being killed on that corner. And he said, no, that's not the way that works. I said, trust me, the first time somebody's killed, and it could be me because I was driving out of 330 today, and it took me, I felt like forever to get out of there because Toyota traffic is coming, and I'm pulling off of Blossom Park. I could hardly get out. And every time I hold my breath and I go, because I usually make a left-hand turn towards Lowe's, it's terrible. I mean, 8 years ago, before Joe was the director, who was it? Carl was the previous, or Earl. I was close. Earl. I got a letter in the mail that says they were looking at and recommending a light there, and I replied. I called Earl and said, Earl, I'd love and support a light. I wasn't on planning and zoning back then. I'd love nothing more than a light there, but it just seems like it's going to take somebody, me, one of you, to get killed on that corner before we get our light. So I couldn't be more in favor of seeing a light there. The removal of the west entrance, we'll ask Mr. Hill to address that. I think that'd be a great idea to maybe either center and have one entrance, and that'd be something, of course, he as the applicant would have to support. But that one entrance that is the west side of the Ikebana is quite close to the corner. And then, of course, Mr. Hill, if you want to come up and ask, you know, we didn't have any questions to address the removal of the west entrance, and then what kind of retail store. Ladies, of course, would like a clothing store.
Sorry, ladies. Sure, happy to answer as many of these questions as possible. As far as the user, it's a single user. It is a tool company. So it's one single retailer. It's a lower traffic generator than the previous user as a restaurant. The engineers and international trip generation manuals will answer that question for you. This particular retail use generates much less traffic than a restaurant. And I would imagine the restaurant's trip generation was included in the traffic study that was referenced earlier, which is a higher generator than what we're proposing. I understand your frustrations about the traffic and the lack of a stoplight. Again, as the chairman mentioned, that's out of the developer's hands. That's solely up to the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, unfortunately. As far as the west access, I scaled it on our plan here while that was brought up. It's actually 50 feet from the intersection, the west entrance. So it's not 10 feet. There is 50 feet there, enough for a couple cars to stack up before turning left. It's also vital for our maneuvering in and through the site, not only for passenger vehicles, but more importantly also for delivery vehicles. To get in and out and around that site adequately, that entrance is needed as well. One thing that I did note also, for what it's worth, previously, or up until a few years ago, Ikebana and the adjacent street were private access easements. In the last few years, they were dedicated as public streets, so they are fully dedicated public streets, and with all the issues and concerns and rights that a public street affords. We're not proposing any new access points, changing them. We're just simply asking to use the existing access points that have been in place for several years, and that will accommodate fewer vehicles than the Golden Corral has been accommodating in the past.
if you were to remove that front entrance, you have the second one, plus technically you have a third one coming into that adjoining 26 or whatever spots there, because we're not requiring, well, we're looking at possibly a waiver of the green, the shrubbery, I think is, waiver of screening requirements on the east end. Would that not still be, you'd still have two accesses if you close that westernly access?
Mark, if I might, excuse me,
sure,
let me
please,
jump in
Mr.
here.
Mifflin.
It's the, on the other side of town at the Dollar General store, they've got limited access in a couple of different ways. You could have an entrance on this westernmost thing, and then the eastern have the exit. So that you still have good traffic flow through there, but you just don't have people coming out that western entrance right into the stop sign.
Are you saying western would be an entrance?
Yeah.
The eastern would be an exit?
Yeah, yeah.
Would you be opposed to that?
I would have to confer with my client on
Okay.
that specifically.
Or make that.
Well, you can't do a right in. Yeah, you can't do a right.
Yeah, that's what I say.
I think this
Enter
could be.
only.
I think this could be enter and exit.
Right, yeah.
This one would be
Enter only.
in only.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, it'd be a right turn in only off Ikebana, which would be nice.
Yeah.
I mean, that wouldn't be bad.
And then you have entrance or exit out the other
on
way.
the second one. If you'd like to defer to your client, please.
Well, I think he wants to speak, actually.
Okay, sure.
Put my hand up. I apologize.
You swear or affirm statement you're about to make be the truth, to the best of your information and belief.
I do, sir.
Thank you.
I'm Mike Leonard with Hogan Real Estate in Louisville, Kentucky. The challenge with just doing a right in there is just enforcing it, and then it really, in our experience, can become more dangerous. And the reason I say that is we need the width to get the truck in. And so I've sat out there and watched it. I mean, for the most part, users are self-policing, especially when there's another option, and I think there's another good option to exit here. And that's the reason why we're proposing to leave the two entrances as they are. It's, some of it is it's just the utility of the site. So the truck comes in at one end, wraps around, and then can leave back out the other way. And obviously, the streets limit our ability to move the vehicle, the truck. So,
And to Mr. Mifflin's point, I live right there by the General Dollar stores there.
Yeah.
They're both right in, right out only. And I'll be darned, there's more people coming off of Broadway and making that left in.
it's worse.
They violate it, and they've
Yeah.
almost caused some
Yeah.
accidents because of it. So
we've had
I
experience.
have seen that.
So,
All right.
any other questions?
I'd actually personally say I'd be in favor of getting rid of that entrance than trying to do a right in, right out. I mean, I honestly, it would be a nightmare trying to do a right in only, and
Just
then making
put a big arrow in it.
Yeah. They got big arrows on both the dollar stores, Steve. You should go over there and watch. It's terrible. So thank you.
Again, I think the key is that we can't lose sight of is that our user will be less cars than the restaurant. I think that, and I realize there's a bigger picture, but
I
from our
definitely went to
perspective,
the restaurant more than I'd go to a tool store, and maybe it's the banker in me. I don't know. But thank you. Any other questions before Mr. Leonard sits down? Anybody have questions for Mr. Leonard? Any other comments or questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
Just on that,
Again, state your name again.
Yeah, Mark Webb, 131
Thank you,
Birkdale.
sir.
I mean, if it's tool, I'm assuming you're going to have semis coming in and out. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, so now you're talking, if they're coming in that first turn, they're making a
Big
wide
turn. Yes, sir.
turn where basically on the egress out of the neighborhood. So just something
Ben, do you
consider
want to
as well.
touch on that? Would Ikebana be wide enough to support semis?
It's typical straight width, so.
Yeah.
It meets specs. Okay, well, a lot of roads don't allow semis because of the width or size of the road. So, Mr. Leonard, you wanted to speak to that?
just to add to that, it's a national retailer, so they force us to run those programs, and so
Gotcha.
the street does
Meet
working
requirements.
requirements.
Okay,
So.
thank you, sir. Mr. Keller, please come back up to the lectern.
The nice thing of being a resident in Cherry Blossom, I kind of remember back when, Charlie, but when Golden Corral was there, their semis did not use that front entrance because it's not wide enough for it to make the turn. And you can run every CAD drawing I've ever seen and it will not get in there. Now with the building position there. It can only come in the back entrance, and it did a loop around, kind of like a reverse drive. So again, I'll push hard that that front entrance goes away, because I know that there's an accident waiting to come in there. Because in your tool trade, you're gonna have people coming in there with trailers and big pickups, and a trailer behind it, hydraulic or just a trailer, and they're gonna pull out left from there, and what are they gonna do? Whether it's 50 feet or 20 feet, it's gonna be in the way. So I'm suggesting you move it or close it.
I appreciate that comment. Mr. Leonard or Mr. Hill, if you want to answer, either of you want to answer, is there no way that we could center the entrance to be directly north of the building? So move both entrances and make a wider, more, what's the word I'm looking for?
We need to move one of them.
Yeah, just to make it a bigger entrance, so you have cars, trucks, it'd be a nice turnaround. I mean, to Mr. Keller's point, that one entrance is tough.
Well, again, the challenge with that is the wider the entrance get, the more more difficult it gets the police. And again, the problem is the traffic, the delivery truck pattern doesn't work without having the two entrances.
Do you see the truck going around the backside? When I say the backside of the building, I guess that'd be considered the south side for deliveries? Or is it actually, looks like it might be and I should start bringing my glasses.
Yeah,
is it the west side for trailer, what's this truck drop and hook trailer location, which it looks like the west side of the building?
Correct.
Or east side. Thanks,
is that
Matt,
the east side?
for directionally challenged tonight, I guess. East side of building.
Yeah, it comes in.
So how would the trucks come in?
Yeah, I think so. Does that work? Oh, yes.
There you go.
So the truck comes in this way, makes this turn, and then back out this way.
And where's the I guess you'd call it loading dock?
Yeah, the loading area is right here.
So it would be that where the trailer location and drop off and hook is.
Mike, correct me if I'm wrong.
It looks like it'd be a tight turn, but
How's
sure.
the 50-foot semi-truck make that turn?
I don't.
Radius can't
Yeah.
We
Mr. Keller, did you want to come up and speak?
Yeah. Just to answer that a little bit, we run the calculations, and with the curbs adjusted, or as we're showing them, it works. So, I mean, that's all I can say.
Hopefully he answered your question.
No, I would like to see the CAD drawing with the radius of the truck that doesn't go over the side of the road of the outbound traffic from the Cherry Blossom Townhome development. Because if that car is coming up there in a sleepy morning, headed out, and that truck all of a sudden veers across to get in that first entrance,
Oh yeah, because it would have to.
it would have to.
gonna
It
come out
cannot
wide.
make that radius turn.
Yeah, not with the tip out.
And just as a matter of fact, I have 6 Burger Kings that have one entrance, and we get our semi in 3 times a week. So it can be done, you just gotta do a bigger road cut. I think it's 25 feet or 30. So you get 1 big lane coming in and 3 going out or 2 out.
It looks like both of these are 30-foot wide, is what I think I'm reading. So they are pretty wide entrances. But any other comments, questions? Yes, ma'am. Come on up to the lectern.
I don't think I signed in anymore. Sorry. Amanda Gray.
Do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to make to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
Yes.
Thank you.
I live at 120 Sunningdale, and I'm actually the vice president of our HOA at Cherry Blossom. One of the things that we need to keep in mind that we've not mentioned yet is, we know that the retail space is going to get filled up, and we do need to keep in mind the traffic. With the semi-trucks coming in to do the loads, and I understand that you need that for your business, but what we aren't looking at is we have school buses going down that same street that is very, it's going to be super narrow. If you have a semi-truck trying to come in or out, and you have school buses, I don't know what time the deliveries are, but we have kids walking, a lot of times on that little road, and if the semi truck is trying to get in, first of all, it's going to take a really long time for that to happen, to be able to make those turns and get into that location based on traffic. But if we have a school bus and we have traffic and we have a semi, it's even going to be more of a jam. And it's a little concerning that we have small children that, you know, are going to be in that area.
So I wouldn't disagree with school buses. So you have school buses coming in and out, but you have children walking on Icabana and Blossom Park?
On Blossom Park, yes.
In front of that building? Because
I don't know about in front of
okay.
that building, just I know that area, and if, you know, obviously if the semi-trucks are going to be backed up, or if a school bus is backed up, or all the traffic, you know, you've seen it. So that's just something to keep in mind, that if we have people, children, you know, for the most part, and not just in Cherry Blossom, but there's children in front of Cherry Blossom that they walk all over the place. So that's just something we need to keep in mind. And I don't think anybody in Cherry Blossom wants to keep retail from coming. I think that what we're looking at is asking, you know, the commission to look at possibly postponing this until we can do something about that traffic right there, because we don't want anyone to get hurt or get killed until that's looked at. So that's all I have.
Thank you. All right. Any other comments, questions? If not,
No, the comment I had to make was, if I recall correctly, I believe the person for Department of Transportation said that the more that goes in here, the more likely that we are to get a light at that intersection, just because I guess I'm saying the traffic counts didn't justify it at the time. Or
if I'm not mistaken, and Joe's nodding, I don't think they said it.
He said it was too close.
Too close to the.
He said there'll never be one there because it'll be too close to the light at the bypass and Connector Road. He said
And too close to Old Oxford.
It would make the traffic back up even further down Connector.
I think they're going to have to revisit that.
And I think when we talked about the fitness center coming in, we did discuss closing off the entrance to Starbucks, which I don't know if we ever approached Starbucks. Joe, did we ever approach Starbucks to ask that? To your point, I think, Mr. Thompson, I'm sure Starbucks would not want that, because and I don't go to Starbucks because it's too darn expensive, but their cars are lined up past the frontage road and a lot of times onto Connector Road, which is terrible. Their parking lot is way too small for the amount of business they do. So,
Mr. Chairman, some time ago when we were talking about other issues here, we just said we really need to stop all development in that area until traffic is taken care of.
We talked about that. Yeah.
We talked about it. We keep going ahead and just approving everything new without.
Well, because we keep getting told that that's a state road. We had the same problem with the subdivision behind Ann Mason. There's 450 homes going there, and right now, they don't want to widen roads. They don't want to put more lights in because the traffic studies currently don't call for it until they get more traffic or somebody gets killed. And he said that's not the reason they put a light in, but guaranteed that when somebody dies there, hopefully not me or anybody in this room, they're going to put a light in there then.
How low an IQ do you have to be on the traffic board or whatever? State traffic.
That's your comment, not mine.
So, Joe, would the developers or this commission approach the Department of Transportation again about a light at that area?
Traffic study.
Yeah, I think we could. I think we could ask them. I know that
in the
there's a
past,
grant.
Mr. Mifflin, we have highly requested and recommended a light be put in, and we've asked Joe to write the state and ask for a light. We can do it again on this one.
Oh, I think we ought to.
And I think, I'm not sure if we did it on the fitness center or not, but I know in the past we have definitely highly recommended to the state or sent a recommendation to ask for or almost demand a traffic light. And we have that right, correct, Mr. Perkins?
Oh, absolutely. We can screen for anything we think is appropriate. We just don't
I'd be
always
happy to
get
go
it.
on record because, like I said, I manage the business right across the street from this development. I'd love to see a light, and I'd actually recommend maybe as part of, well, I won't make the motion, but I would definitely suggest we recommend a light be put there and ask the state to put a light there.
And I understand that Connector Road and Blossom Park, it is close to the bypass, the light there, but those lights can be synchronized so that they run
I've seen them that close in Lexington, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure we look around town, we could probably find some too, but it's going to be a problem either way. You either got a light that controls entrance and exits there, or you just leave it wide open for people to shoot across there when they get a chance there. So,
or you have total paralysis, nobody can move.
Yeah, and nobody can move there.
Joe, when Lifetime Fitness came roughly about a year ago, did we not talk about there was going to be a through road? Was it through to Old Oxford Road? And I felt like that was just a Band-Aid. I really don't think that was the answer. That was just a Band-Aid to probably pacify the community. And, of course, the other was a recommendation to close that entrance to Starbucks. Did we ever where is that at?
The road connection is, I think they started on it this week, so they are going to make a connection over to
And that's
Oxford
from
Drive.
Blossom Park to Old Oxford?
Mm-hmm.
And where's that located?
It's past the Jiffy Lube. Valvoline. Past the Valvoline.
I didn't notice it. I don't know if any of you have
just
noticed.
Just to the north, about.
Mr. Keller's saying.
It's staked off.
Okay.
So,
Again, it'll help a little bit. It's a Band-Aid.
Make it worse, I think.
Yeah.
I think it'll have you'll have another way in and out without
I've
going
watched
through the
people cut through
neighborhood.
Valvoline all the time, so I understand.
This is also a redevelop. I mean, they're redeveloping the site, so somebody could come in and just renovate the building, put a new restaurant in there, put in a couple retail places.
I mean, as I look at this, I
without
think
doing
it's going to be
anything.
better than what
so-
was there. Golden Corral had a lot of traffic. I don't see myself going to Tool Store 2-3 times a week. I could definitely still go to Golden Corral 2-3 times a week. So, hold that, Mr. Mifflin. So I think traffic would be a little slower. Mrs. Fannin, come on back up. And
I just have a question. I know your all's job is really difficult, but at what point does a neighborhood get a point of saturation? I mean, I think we're there with this. I mean, because we're just getting surrounded by, I'm looking at a plat here of all the stuff that's going in back behind us. Right. And then I know that the developers asked to put another 200 homes behind us. Yeah. So at what point is there a saturation limit? Do you guys know?
No, I felt bad because when Lifetime Fitness was coming in, all the neighbors come out, especially, or Planet Fitness, sorry. All the neighbors come out, especially the ones on Spyglass, because they backed up right to it. The problem or I think to Charlie's point, is that's been B5 forever.
For 20 years.
20 years. And so most of you weren't there 20 years ago, most of you. And it's finally getting developed because I think, and it's terrible, we were running out of space.
We do it when we borrow homes.
Right.
So
Mr. Thompson, go back up there.
Just one thing, you're talking about petitioning the state again for a light, which is great. But at what point do we hold off on approving things to see what instead of just approving things, and say, yes, there may be a change, but more than likely it's not going to be. I mean, where do we draw the line? I mean, we can take this all the way back. I remember coming to Planning and Zoning Commissions last year where, I remember the development of the townhomes behind Pleasant Valley where the developer agreed to give space to Lexus Way. Well, Lexus Way is not coming through yet, and those people were still on this. I mean, we can't continue to do what ifs. I mean, at some point, yes, we all want the city to make money, but you got to think about the residents that live here too, and what we have to deal with when it comes to this. At least try to postpone and see if the state will do something first before we continue to. Because in a couple months, I assume Marriott's going to be in here wanting to approve the hotel that's going to be going in right there next to the Planet Fitness. I mean, they already have signs up saying it's the future home of it. So,
do they really? I don't think we ever approved.
I mean, there's been a sign up for 8 months saying
we haven't approved.
There's been a sign. There's a sign up right there. Future home of Marriott Town Place and Suites. And a smoothie king.
They're putting a chicken before the egg.
And a smoothie king. So I mean, what's going to keep the approval from that going in? Saying, well, maybe one day a light will go in there.
Here's the problem: is I think if you put the community on hold and say, hey, until we get our lights, we're not going to build anymore. Unfortunately, it's one of those. I think the traffic has to be there first before they put the light in.
But I feel like on Connector Road, I feel like your Connector Road's at a cat.
That's terrible.
I mean, across the I mean, I know the commissioner, Mr. Jones. You know, he said I'll deny everything on Connector Road for as long as I live until something is put.
That's
You know,
'cause he
something
knew he was gonna be off
is
here in a
something
few
is
months.
done. You know, so I mean, at some point we have to look at it and say, yes, there is a problem here. And that traffic study, by the way, what you, Mr. Wiseman, had brought up, that traffic study was done. Golden Corral had already been closed and boarded up when that traffic study was done for Planet Fitness. Planet Fitness, so it had an F without any businesses even being in that area. So now you're going to be putting in a gym that's going to be open 24/7, by the way. So traffic in and out of there all day, every day of the week, never closed, 24/7. And then putting something else that's going to be bringing semi-trucks in there to make some miraculous turn to get into the parking lot. How I still would love to see that happen. So at some point, where do we draw the line and say, hey, let's hold off on this for a second and see if the state is ever going to at least take it to them first. That's all.
Joe, were you were planning and zoning when Earl had that potentially light being wanted to put the light there? What? I wasn't on planning and zoning back then, but I don't remember. I just know we got a letter in the mail, and it asked if we wanted a light, and I wanted a light, so I said yes. But that's all I think I ever came of. There was not a hearing that I'm aware of. Charlie might be able to remember. That was before, I think, everybody on here's time.
Yeah, back in the day.
Back in the day, Charlie, back in the day. There you go.
I think that was an internal proposal,
okay.
Try and come up with a solution to that for that intersection.
So 7, 8 years ago, they were looking at putting a light, and here we are still with no light.
A couple of the property owners didn't like it. I mean, wouldn't go along with it. They didn't agree that was the solution that they.
Probably a couple business owners is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. So I don't think it went any farther than that.
But I was also thinking the state had said it was too close to the corner, and it was unlikely to ever be one there.
Well, I think it involved a lot of parts and pieces, not just a light, but closing
Some
of
widening
streets.
of
Yeah, possibly closing Old Oxford or Oxford Drive. Yeah, I think that was the scenario. They said they could possibly do that.
Which I would assume there's several businesses on Old Oxford that wouldn't want that, including Applebee's. So, all right, thank you, Joe. Unless anybody's got any more questions.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it seems to me like at some point we're going to have to put a moratorium on development in that area because it's getting worse and worse. And the idea of a hotel going in there in addition to this,
I agree.
After Planet, it seems ridiculous to me.
Well, and that's first I've heard of it, and I didn't.
Yeah, me too.
Wow. I go to see how the building's coming along, and I've never seen that sign.
It's part of the real estate. Whoever's selling the property says future home of town.
I'll look tomorrow, I promise you.
Coming soon.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I think the responsible thing to do, it's not responsible to this developer, it's not responsible to the applicant, but I think if the state's not going to address the issue, it's not going to work for people to have commercial spaces or any more houses or anything built back in there if they don't take care of the traffic issue. If we can't come up with some solution at that intersection, I would recommend that we deny this.
Are you
and
making a
put
motion?
the pressure, yes.
All right.
It's a motion that we deny this and until the state will assure us that they're going to take care of that intersection.
I second the
nothing
motion.
else will happen in that area.
I second the motion.
So I've got a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Wiseman to decline.
To deny it, yeah.
Deny.
But like Joe said, somebody can go ahead and redo the existing building that's there, correct? Without any changes at all and open
could.
another restaurant back
They
there.
could.
Or any other store.
Yeah.
But we're not going to allow anything new to happen there until the state addresses the problem.
But it's,
But if they don't change the site,
if these
they can
folks
go
had
ahead
come
and
in
do it.
here and just use the existing building,
And do the
Well,
same
And
thing.
They could have done
be
the
worse
same thing.
off
They
then
can use the existing
than
building if they want.
they
Well,
come
that's not
in
gonna
with a
change the
tool.
traffic or anything.
And I understand,
But we're not going to
trust me, I go in there a lot, so I know what you're talking about.
Let's try to have one conversation up here. Mr. Vest's talking, and we'll let you all talk.
The bank, I go in the bank a lot, and it's a bad spot. I agree 110%. But the thing of the matter is here, if somebody comes in and puts a restaurant back in there, it's liable to be worse than if the state doesn't do anything versus a guy buying a piece of property wanting to have a tool store. So, you know, just like what you were saying a while ago about, you know, you gotta consider the people in the community, we gotta consider everybody.
But we've been saying for 6 years that we gotta draw the line sometime.
I agree, but what happens if somebody goes in and opens
I'd say
another
we
restaurant?
draw the line right now. We say.
I mean, we're not gonna have control over that. All we have control over is whether they wanna build a building to have a tool store.
I don't have anything against them having that retail space there, but the state's gotta take care of the problem. They won't do it.
I mean, I agree 100%, 100%.
So I have a question for Mr. Hill or Mr. Leonard. Are you tearing down the existing building and then going to build a brand new building? So it'd be, I would assume, a little more attractive than what's there today?
We will tear down the building and build a brand-new building.
Okay.
You know, the reality, again, I go back to if a restaurant was to go, another restaurant was to replace what's there, all the statistics, what are the traffic people statistics, Mike, the association? Yeah, when they compare restaurants to our use has significantly less traffic than.
Are you at this point able to say who the store is?
Harbor Freight Tools.
What, Harbor Freight? Okay. I don't know who that is.
Now, that's gonna have a little more
Yeah.
traffic than a grocery store.
Is it more than a what?
More than a normal
Tool store.
tool store would.
Okay.
Yeah, not necessarily.
Currently Harbor Freight's in Lexington,
Right.
over
Okay.
off of New
They're-
Circle.
they're-
Yeah,
shopping center.
Okay.
in
Yeah.
Eastland.
They're a
See that?
strong national operator, and they do a good job.
Yeah,
I mean,
they do. They're really great. Mike uses them a lot.
And I understand all the problems, but I'm sick and tired of seeing that empty building sitting there too.
I am too.
That's a sore
I think it's
spot.
been empty 4 years, if not 5.
Can I say something?
Sure, come on up, Mr. Thompson.
You know, again, I feel like we're going back to what ifs. If, you know, a restaurant, let's be realistic, that building's been vacant for 4 years. Nobody's going to go in and do anything with that building. Sure. I mean, so we can't go off what ifs. I mean, like Mr. Smith said, we got to draw the line at some point, and it's been vacant for 4 years.
It may be
I'm
make
fine
it for
with it.
another tenant, and that would probably please the residents.
And I
'cause
back up to it.
There wouldn't be
I'm on
traffic.
Spyglass. I look at it. I mean,
Yeah.
I can barely see it now because of the monstrous Planet Fitness in my backyard. But other than that, yeah.
Thank you. All right.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we do have a motion to decline by Mr. Smith and a seconded by Mr. Wiseman. So probably do a roll call, Charlie, or just a...
Do you have another comment?
It's not required, but just for
we'll do a roll call
clarity's
for the
sake,
record.
Sure.
So this would be, a yes would be to decline the application. Mr. Wiseman,
Yes.
Mr. Mifflin,
No,
so a no would be to
approve it.
approve it, correct. Mr. Vest,
No.
Mr. Stone,
No.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Mizell,
No.
and the chair says, it doesn't matter. Chair says yes to decline. So it does pass 4-3.
Well,
Or no, it doesn't pass. It doesn't get declined.
It doesn't, yeah, it doesn't fail.
Thank you. It doesn't
You
fail.
still have to have a motion, second, and vote in order for it to pass.
So, yes, so at this point, the motion to decline does not pass. So at this point, we either would take a motion, we'd either take a motion to approve or no motion at all, which we have that
How
option
well is this
as
thing
well.
gonna, how well is this business gonna function with F traffic situation? And any other business that goes back in there? When are they gonna fix it?
Honestly, I think
And
as
it's not just the business, it's all the residents that live back there.
As
that-
Planet Fitness comes in, heaven forbid a hotel, but if it is what it is and they've got that much confidence future of, and they haven't even brought it to us, but that's all B5, and if it eventually gets all developed, it's gonna be a traffic nightmare. But it is
It is.
B5, it's zone B5 and has been for 20 years. I think it's just a matter of time, and then unfortunately over time, I think the light will have to come. It just has to come. I can't, that's terrible now.
Well,
I mean, you know,
I wouldn't-
Reconfigure the road system.
if you want
out
it to
there.
come, I think you need to deny this, and they'll look at it a lot harder.
No, they won't.
I just
No,
think,
they
I just
will.
want everybody to know it's sitting over there looking at me. I'm not for this traffic. I'm for you all. I'm also for them, and we're kind of caught in the middle here because they're business people going to build a building and have a business that's going to benefit all of us in here. Yes, sir.
Move
I'm sorry.
the west entrance. I
You
don't
don't have no
I
phone,
don't
though,
care
right?
if they have a
Well,
retail in there.
yeah, we can.
We have the authority to tell them to
Prevent
move
accident.
We can get engineer, we can ask engineering to work with them.
I mean, we have to have, reasons we can document, and that sounds perfectly reasonable.
To Mr. Hill and
but yeah,
Mr.
we
Leonard, I
can-
guess
we
what I'm
can
hearing
address
is, a lot of the residents would prefer either move that entrance back. Would you be able to work with them and maybe move that back? And I think might be able to get this approved tonight.
Well, I don't mind working with them. The challenge is we have to, we have.
Yeah, please, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Come on up.
Yeah, we have to be able to get the truck in and out of there, and so, the two entrances are there. They function, and the truck can pattern through them. So, I don't want to give anybody false expectations too. I could agree to go work with them and move it a foot. I don't think that helps anybody.
If we were to do a right-in only in that closest entrance, which would be to the west, right, Matt? To the west? If we did a right-in only with the sign like Steve said and maybe a little curb, I just don't know if a truck can make that turn then.
Well, it's gonna be the same width for the truck pattern, and again, we get into the problem of somebody going out the wrong exit.
Yeah.
And I think that's.
But I mean, if you
that's
do a
kinda
right-in
worse.
only in that first entrance, and then the back one, actually have two with that extended parking lot, can be ins or outs either way.
We do not. There is no legal access to the parcel next to it. It's a separate ownership, so that's kind of we kind of got to
But
work through
it's,
that.
it's an extended
I
parking
mean, long
lot.
term. Yeah.
It'll be a shared parking lot, hopefully eventually.
Eventually.
But I do see
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Our staff puts variances and restrictions on there all the time, and we could say that we want them to look at the entrances.
I say prove it with the first entrance being removed completely.
Well, but again, the applicant has to agree to that, correct, Charlie? We can't approve it saying remove the first entrance, and then that's not what their application says.
Well, yes, you probably can do that. It doesn't work well when it's been tried in the past because they've got their plans, they've got their clients, who have certain requirements. It's just like we tried to do something when John Deere didn't like a thing we had to say.
Before our time.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's very difficult. I can understand, though, they've got to come back for a final, and perhaps a condition put on it that with staff, they need to work on getting it further back from the corner, something like that. And then if it comes down to it, when it comes back to you, and they haven't satisfied your concerns about that, then perhaps at that point you deny it. That kind of thing you've got some say over. Obviously, we have to have reasons for it, because if it fits our requirements otherwise, then we're kind of looked at suspiciously if we start saying, no, we're not going to approve it. But if there are particular reasons to do that, and there may well be here, just because of traffic, closeness, and all that. But once we get to the final, of course, we'll have to be cutting bait and fishing at that point rather than messing with it.
It's up to you all. I'm just helping the meeting run too long.
So would it be appropriate to make a motion to approve with the condition that some consideration be given to that west entrance? Maybe that's not quite the right way to word it, but.
Yeah. Charlie, how would we word that?
Work with the staff.
Yeah, you might just say, approve this, however, prior to final coming back, and you want it to come back, that they need to work with staff on relocating, combining, doing something with those entrances to make it safer for Icabana, make it less of a traffic blocker as it may appear to be now. Then when it comes back, they've worked with it. If staff recommends what they've got, we can take a look at that and you go ahead and approve. If they're at loggerheads, well, you might at that point say, no, we're not going to. But that's clearly is a sticking point that needs to be looked at.
We don't have an issue working with the staff. I just don't want false expectations. In other words, if we're on the same team trying to get to the same place,
Sure.
I think we're okay with that.
Hopefully with the neighbors and us and we can come to a common agreement and get you open. Is what I'd like
I just
to
worry
say.
that one entrance is not, is just not feasible, so if that's the expectation, then, it just.
I don't think one entrance is feasible.
No, we may have to move that one entrance maybe just a hair back 20, 30 feet maybe. I don't know. I know Mr. Keller has some experience with his Burger Kings.
Or one way in and one way out or whatever, but that way we can work with the staff and looking at it and see.
All right, so we've got a motion by
agreeable to work.
Mrs. Mizell to approve with the consideration of working with
the
staff.
staff on the west entrance for
Yeah.
the truck.
As well as it needs to come back for final approval.
Exactly.
Okay, so I've got a motion by Mrs. Mizell,
Second.
second by Mr. Mifflin. I'll do a roll call again just to stay. So Mr. White, this is to approve with the conditions that Mrs. Mizell. Mr. Wiseman?
Before I vote,
Yes,
how
sir.
did you word that condition?
Go ahead, Mrs.
To
Mizell.
work with the staff on the west entrance to possibly move the west entrance back 20 or 30 feet to work for the truck to come in and still have the second exit entrance for deliveries and stuff. So they're still gonna have the two entrance and exits.
As well as have to come back for final
Yeah.
approval.
Could we
plus
be
come back
more
for
general and say
final.
redesign the egress and exit
Yes.
Let's do that.
completely for safety considerations?
Right.
Okay. Then if it worded like that, I could vote yes.
So, okay, so we have a first by Mr. Mizell, a second by
Mrs.
Mr.
Mizell.
Mrs. Mizell. What'd I say? Mr.
Mr.
Sorry. I know better.
I haven't had a
So I have a yes by Mr. Wiseman. Mr. Mifflin?
Yes.
Mr. Vest?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
No. Be no from now on.
Okay,
This whole area.
Mrs. Mizell?
yes.
Giggles. And the chair votes yes. Approved. All right. Mr. Leonard or Mr. Hill, step up to Mr. Perkins, sign away. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate all the feedback. Next on the agenda is Jewett Properties.
Y'all being responsible
Does anybody need a break?
to that neighborhood.
No, good. All right, FSP 2019-20, Jewett Properties, Toyota 2 Show. Preliminary subdivision plat to subdivide the Jewett property into 3 tracts and to create parcels for the access and future right-of-way dedication located at 257 Rogers Gap Road.
Yeah, we had a good opportunity.
Matt, thank you.
All right. As you mentioned, this is a subdivision plat, a preliminary subdivision plat to subdivide the Jewett property. It's currently about 80 acres in size, and they are looking to subdivide 2 20-acre tracts on the south side of that property, and then leave the remaining 40 acres, as one parcel. They're also looking to create some smaller parcels that will be designated as non-buildable as in terms of residential or commercial development, and those will be intended to be used as an access easement in the early stages, and then later that would be designated as right-of-way in the hopes that the road that they're planning on constructing could be eligible for acceptance by the county. So the lots that are involved is there's the current campground lot at 257 Rogers Gap Road, and then Pat Jewett's, or the Jewett property is the property to the south. It doesn't currently have an address, otherwise I would use it to identify it. The property is currently zoned A1, which is our agricultural zone, and the surrounding properties are either zoned A1 or directly to the south is the Toyota 2 Show property, which is zoned I1, which is our light industrial. The access to the property is and will be from Rogers Gap Road. So this is the zoning map showing the property. I've roughly, once again, this isn't exact, but I've roughly outlined the property in question in blue here. As you can see, it is zoned A1. The property to the south is zoned I1, which is light industrial. You've got the interstate here to the west, and then this is Rogers Gap Road to the north. Just another view to help you get a feel for the property. This is an aerial photo. Probably should have mentioned earlier. This is a Highview Path that runs down here along the eastern side. It doesn't actually. It's not on this property. It doesn't provide access to this property, but it is a private road that was created basically to serve all of these lots here to the east. So looking at this is their preliminary subdivision plat, and it's actually kind of turned. So if you're looking at this, north is to the right. This area here. This is the 80 acres of the Jewett property. So that, as you can see, there's two roughly 20-acre lots that they're proposing to create here in the rear. If you all remember from last year, Toyota Tusho came before us and got approval to construct a road from Rogers Gap Road down to their property. And so another thing that this preliminary plat is looking to do is basically set aside the area that would in future become the right-of-way, so that the lots that they create will have access to the road. Yeah, access to the road. In this case, Rogers Gap Road. And then in future, if this road that they're planning on constructing is accepted by the county and is a public road, the access would be directly to that road, if that makes sense. Okay. The lots that they're proposing comply with all of our regulations and requirements. Creating this, what will at first be an access easement, will provide access prior to platting. We'll ask the applicant to get utility signatures, health department signature, just so something doesn't go according to plan and the property isn't sold to Toyota Tusho. These lots would be have their preliminary approval and be buildable. A home could be built on these lots as agricultural lots. There's no landscaping required for a subdivision plat like this. The property is zoned agricultural. There's no buffers required from agricultural to agricultural. There's no buffers that are required from agricultural to industrial. I am recommending approval of this plat with the 4 conditions listed there on the screen and in your staff reports. It complies with our regulations.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt?
Yes, sir. The road itself, it runs parallel to Highview. Does it butt up next to it, or is there?
I don't believe that it. Ben's not here. The applicant would be better suited to answer that question.
Thank you, Matt. We'll bring the applicant up here.
Who were those people earlier tonight?
I was hoping I would have to speak, but this ain't how I do.
You swear or affirm the statement you're about to give to be the truth, to the best of your information and belief?
I do. My name's Ted Malin. I'm with Toyota Tusho.
Last name again, please?
Malin, M-A-L-I-N. As far as the road and Highview, our proposed road in Highview Pass, it does not connect. There is a separation that the state transportation cabinet required, and that's how the road is designed. So it's basically farther, our entrance to the road, or the entrance to that road, is the required amount to the west of Highview Pass.
I mean, is there a fence that separates them or anything, or just a grass strip?
Currently, right now, there is a fence that runs between the current Jewett property and Highview Pass.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Malin?
Malin, yeah.
Malin. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Anybody here to speak in favor or against, please come up. And there must have been somebody, because we could have went, I think, consent on this. So I think somebody must have had some questions. They may have left. Anybody here to speak against or in favor? Otherwise, I need a motion. We could have went consent, and I know I asked somebody.
Send the bailiff after whoever that was.
Yes, exactly. So
Yeah.
that was a waste of an extra probably 10 minutes. So I guess I need a motion on this one.
I make a motion to,
To approve?
yeah.
Mrs. Mizell makes a motion to approve FSP 2019-20.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Stone. I guess we could just say all in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, it gets approved. Well, we need that bailiff to go after that person because we could have consent on that one. I think that's it, except for other business,
Oh,
right?
Yep.
Because the other ones were withdrawn and
no,
continued.
it's fine.
So,
We have, next under other business, the change in address, the plat correction we did at workshop.
we
So-
did vote at workshop, and I've signed that and sent it down to
Okay.
Charlie already.
So the next item is this, discussion on a zoning ordinance, revision. And this isn't a public hearing. We're gonna do the public hearing hopefully next month, but I just wanted to get some feedback on this before we move forward with the proposal. And this has to do with our zoning, the way our zoning ordinance treats outdoor storage and outdoor display of products and outdoor processing. It kind of lumps all those things together, and it's not real clear on how they're treated in each district. So I kind of wanted to talk about maybe better defining them in our zoning ordinance so it would be easier to apply and to enforce. So as a way of background, these are our commercial districts and our one industrial district besides heavy industrial, which essentially allows everything. So it's not even, I'm not even going to address it, but there are 5 commercial districts. B1's neighborhood commercial. It doesn't even mention outdoor display or storage of products. B2's our general highway commercial. It's our catch-all commercial district. It basically, that's where it permits most commercial uses that need a lot of storage. So although it doesn't list every use that would be permitted in there, it does say retail uses that require large storage or display space. It doesn't say outdoor storage or outdoor display space. It just said that's our catch-all. So it doesn't, essentially, it doesn't mention outdoor sales and display. I'll get into in a minute how it's been treated in that district. Outdoor storage and processing, as opposed to outdoor sales and display, it's defined differently. It's a conditional use. So if you're storing materials outside, you have to get a conditional use. If you're just displaying products that you're selling, not as opposed to like materials, the products that you're selling in the store, if they're displayed out there, it doesn't even mention, how they're treated, how they're supposed to be treated. So I think, and I'll go further into that. B3's downtown, no mention of either. Essentially, B3 is very permissive. There's no parking standards. We allow mixed use, but there's not a lot of guidance in the district description itself. B4 and B5 are newer districts that were created in the last, I'd say, 20 years. B4 is community commercial. It's supposed to be walkable commercial. It actually conflicts within that district. It says outdoor sales and display of products is a conditional use, but in the design standards of that district, it says outdoor storage and display is allowed if you show it on a development plan. So one part of the zone description, it says you got to get a conditional use for it, and then later on it says if you show it on a development plan, you can do it, which KRS allows for planning commissioners to approve conditional uses. It enables us to write that into the ordinance, but I'm not sure if this happened because KRS allows us to do it, because nowhere else in the zoning ordinance does it say you can do it. But there's conflict here that I think probably needs to be resolved. And then B5 is for planned commercial parks, kind of like the Walmart Center, the old Kmart Center, the Lowe's Center. So that's where you have a big box and then a bunch of outlots that get filled in later or at the same time with smaller commercial retail. It permits a broad range of retail, just like B2. So B2 and B5 are very similar. The only difference really in B5, it's for planned commercial parks, like I said, and it also allows some light industrial. So B5 is retail, your whole gamut of commercial, and then allows some light retail. It says outdoor sales and display and or storage is a conditional use. So it says all those things you need to get a conditional use. But then our big box standards, which you have in B5, says if you show outdoor storage, outdoor display on a development plan, it's permitted. So it's kind of similar to B4. B4 and B5 came in later, and they both kind of treated that the same way. They said outdoor storage and display, show it on a development plan, it's okay. Planning Commission can approve it. I2 doesn't address outdoor storage and display. It just says, it doesn't address outdoor sales and display. It just says outdoor storage and display is a conditional use, and it has some standards for those, that outdoor storage. So there's kind of not real clarity between the districts. So these.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, so I was going to make some recommendations of what I was thinking on ways to clarify it.
Before you do that, one of the things I think that came up Monday, and I think it was with Mr. Wiseman's comment, are a lot of these entities, now I have a list that I just wrote down, going to be grandfathered in to not change where they currently are. And the ones that I think that fall into B5 is 84 Lumber, Walmart, Tractor Supply, possibly Carriage House, and seeing that Mr. Tracy walked in, Tracy's Landscape. Are they all B5?
No, they're combinations. Some may be B5, but they're B2 generally.
And then the question I had is, where does the used car sales lot fall in? Is that a B2 or B5 or special use?
That would be a B2.
Okay, so, and Mr. Tracy said his is a B2. So
Well,
most of these that
I think they are
B2?
grandfathered for the most part.
Okay, because
If
I
they're
don't want to
approved
disturb
already,
Mr.
they're
Tracy's
grandfathered.
business or Walmart or Lowe's or any of those. They've been doing business for years. Carriage House included. They have a lot of outdoor display.
Yeah, if I might make a suggestion, it just occurred to me, perhaps the thing to do, because we've run into this before where things are grandfathered, but we don't have a record of it. So it may be, even though that's a pretty large number of places, that maybe the thing to do is with this adoption, it's strictly going to go forward, and whatever's out there, we send somebody around and get some photographs as to what's there, what's been grandfathered in effect, unless it's something brand new and we can maybe still deal with that. And then that way we have our own database. Because right now we've got some places where I'm pretty sure it's grandfathered in, but on the other hand, I don't have the photographs.
That's my thoughts.
So it's really handy, maybe even get enforcement officers or something. They're always out there, out with cameras, maybe get them to take a few photographs. And then just catalog some of these. And that way we'll have a running record so that as questions arise, we at least have a beginning database. Because we've got some that have been there 40 years and we don't, unless it's an aerial photograph.
Okay. So what are your
So-
thoughts? And then I think
well-
we have some community of people that want to speak.
Okay.
A little bit.
So that's the background of how the ordinance is written now. The only other thing is right after the commercial districts, there's this section that says, has special regulations just for business districts. It says there shall be no outdoor storage of merchandise and no outdoor processing in any commercial district unless you get a conditional use. So it's not saying anything about display, but it says storage of merchandise and processing. So although that clears it up a little bit, because that's basically saying if you're storing stuff out there, you need to get a conditional use no matter if it's mentioned in the individual districts or not. This is kind of a catch-all, but it's not a clear catch-all in my mind. So here's my suggestions, and this is just to get your feedback. Put in definitions, which we don't have definitions in our zoning ordinance, of what outdoor storage is, what outdoor sales and display is, and what outdoor processing is. So define those three things. And then, because of my next suggestion, we need to add a definition of minor development plan to include, or amend our minor development plan definition to include outdoor storage expansion. So my suggestion would be to say outdoor display and sales of products is allowed if shown on a development plan, as long as it's contained within 10% of the lot area. So if you have a 1 acre lot, as long as the outdoor sales and display area is 4,300 square feet, which would be 10% of an acre. As long as it's whatever 10% of the area of the lot, show it on a development plan, either as it's getting approved or if a new use comes in that's not grandfathered, they need to submit a development plan. And if the only development plan change is that they're now doing outdoor storage and display, if it's under 10%, it's a minor development plan. They just submit the drawing to our office.
So 10% or less.
Yeah, 10% or less. And as long as the display areas are accessory to the principal use, so they're not the only use on the property, as long as they're out of any landscape islands, landscape areas, and as long as they're out of the drive aisles or any road right-of-way, then they can be approved. If the use is more than 10%, if they want more than 10% to display stuff outside, then they would have to come to Planning Commission. It would be a major amendment to the development plan. So that's kind of my suggestion on that. Outdoor storage, I suggest removing processing from storage, because processing, we probably don't want outdoor processing in any commercial districts. So we just call it outdoor storage. And if you're going to do outdoor storage, you meet the standards for outdoor storage, which are in the light industrial district, which are, it's incidental to the primary use. You're not using the whole lot for outdoor storage. You screen the outdoor storage from the roads and from adjoining zoning districts, and then the storage is set behind the minimum setback for whatever zone it's in. If you meet those standards, you still have to get a conditional use permit through Board of Adjustment, but as long as you meet those standards, it should be approved. We separate processing from outdoor storage and just require to be a conditional use in all districts. And then those are the oh shoot. I don't know why that kicked off.
So you'll
Thought I
bring
had
these
another-
recommendations to next month's meeting as a public hearing? We'll do it as a public hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to get some feedback, one, on if you think we should allow outdoor sales and display of products.
Going forward?
Everywhere. I mean, should we allow it in the B? I think I put in my recommendation, which I might have a little change of heart in it. I put in there not to allow it. I think I did anyway, in B1 and B3, just because. So if you look at my recommendations for outdoor sales and display, add the language just to B2, cover B2, B4, and B5, since those are our majority districts. We only have a couple B1 neighborhood commercial districts. Maybe we don't want display of, products outside in a neighborhood commercial situation.
Which could potentially be a B2 or B1.
B1 is neighborhood commercial.
Is that like Dollar General?
Well, yeah. But we only have, I think, in Georgetown,
But they do outside
the
sales.
the $2 stores are B1. There's a lot over off the bypass by the mini storage.
What did Hoghead Trailers come to mind just now?
It's B2.
It's B2, so that
So
would
those
be allowed.
three, and there's one off, I think, off exit 129. I'm not
Technically,
sure.
if the dollar stores are B1, I think both of them have outdoor display and sales.
That's true. Yeah.
So
Yeah, they run
Do they-
sidewalk sales
all
every
the
now and
time?
then. And,
Well, during the summer.
and, yeah. And so you're saying they would need a conditional use permit to?
or would they be grandfathered
Well,
in prior? Because it would be prior to this.
They would probably be grandfathered in since it's already in place, but
But a
already
new
been
one that
approved.
comes in.
Is this gonna get it all over the county or just city?
It would be countywide.
In other words, like
Who adopts it.
Well,
I mean, we make the
the
recommendation.
zoning
but
ordinance is
if only
countywide.
Sadie'ville
So,
adopts it, it'll only be applicable to
Yeah.
Sadie'ville.
What about Paul Kleinsman? What's he?
Kleinhans.
Klein's
He's B1.
Oh,
He's
he's
B1.
B1.
Yeah.
And he's got outside sales.
Yeah, you're right.
and
So
display.
yeah, there's multiple. So maybe, yeah, I would
Wonder if
maybe
needs
leave
to
it
be
as an option at
B2
B1.
and B5.
Be just like the tool store we just talked about. They do sidewalk
See, I don't know
sales.
that tool store, so I
Yeah,
apologize.
they have that kind of stuff.
And that was B5 though, I think,
That
wasn't
was, that was B2,
it? Was that B2?
I believe. It was B5.
What about some
B5.
farmers sets out a wagon and a hay baler and a tractor and so on?
Well, that would
Ag.
not be,
That would
if
be
it's
ag,
farm
right?
related, then it's not, wouldn't be regulated.
'Cause what's
I mean,
like
if
Evans
you're,
Orchard
if
or
you, unless it's
Bywater's
a,
both ag probably,
if you
right?
have some kind of farm market, then you'd have to get a conditional use permit for that. And that would be in an A1 district. Actually, there's a catch-all in the A1 that essentially, if it's ag-related, it can be approved as a conditional use as long as,
Joe,
it's
I got a
ag-related.
question about it. Just, have you ever been to Hinton? A little old station called Hinton down in northern Scott County, right along the railroad. Scott County, Harrison County come together right there.
Okay.
Have you ever been in that area?
I have past the trestle coming out of Sadie'ville and going up
It's
that
further on
road.
down, 5 miles.
Oh, okay.
On toward Car End. But anyway, that's off the subject, but everybody in the country's ever been there talks about they need to do something down here. I mean, it's horrible. But there's a places there that you cannot pass on the road half the time for people living there. And you're talking about having 5 or 10% of the lot covered. I'm telling you, they got 150% covered. It's packed. Everywhere.
So they're
It's no
selling
empty
stuff?
spot.
Is that what it is? They're selling things off the
Well,
road?
they carry in everything that anybody will give them, whether it's hydraulic oil, used oil, motor oil, firewood.
But it's a yard
It's junk.
sale.
It's junk. No, it's
Yeah.
junk. It's just pure junk.
But it's not a established retail.
It's not a
facility.
business.
It's probably
Is it in Scott
residential,
County, Hinton?
Yeah, it's in Scott County.
Okay, I thought maybe it was out of the county.
Back a while ago,
Is that
what's his name
south
used
or
to be head
north
of the-
Race Fork? North goes the other way. That's South Race Fork.
South
isn't it,
Race
that goes
Fork.
through Hinton.
Yeah, yeah.
I left B3 out because probably don't want outdoor sales downtown, but then again, then I thought about it.
Sidewalk sales.
And there's a lot of beach or downtown zoned area that's outside of Main Street that's off, secondary streets that.
So Joe, it sounds like you got a little more thinking to do before.
Well, I
you
mean,
come to us next month.
I was hoping you
What about the
do some
farmer's
thinking.
market? That's not ain't got nothing to do with this, would it?
Well,
That's still farm.
Agriculture again.
in the parking lot there,
Even though it's up here?
Joe, how would that fit in the farmer's market there in the big parking lot off of Main? What is that? Broadway and Washington.
Washington, yeah.
Is that a special use permit?
Yeah, that's a. Yeah,
It's city, right?
Yeah, it's on city property.
city property, so that would be exempt. But I don't know if it's a.
Do they need a
Who
permit
actually
to sell
runs the
there?
farmer's market?
We'll just consider them grandfathered.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
So.
I mean, I like B1, B2, and B5 personally because it sounds like we got a lot of B1s that are doing front end sales, dollar stores.
What about the idea of limiting outdoor display and sales, and allowing it by right? I mean, if it's under 10% of the area, I mean,
I'm
You
gonna ask
think
Mr. Tracy, seeing that he blessed us with his presence. What's your percentage of,
Well,
what? No, but what's your percentage of square footage of your outside sales? I think of your mulch and stuff, is that 20%? Okay, I just was hoping you'd have a guess. Okay, I was
Yeah,
just
he
thinking
got-
of you, because, you know, I
got
appreciate
his
you being here
already.
tonight.
You don't want to make it too complicated. It
Yeah,
sounds like
that's
it's getting
true. I mean, we
overly
don't wanna
well,
make it too
I tried to
difficult.
keep it simple.
The-
I tried to
the lady
simplify
here
it.
would like to speak, if you don't, if you want to come up and, oh, no. Is it something totally unrelated to this, or?
Yes, it was zoning. And somehow I think we got overlooked because we were supposed to be here on the 9th at 6 o'clock, which we have been. And it's concerning, continental senior communities. I live on Beechwood Drive.
So this would be unrelated to what we're
This is
talking
the
about?
zone change.
Yeah, this was Ashton that was postponed.
Oh, it was postponed.
We didn't know that.
You showed up late.
You must have showed up late. We go
No.
through, we have an agenda, and so we go through invoices, minutes, the agenda, postponements, withdrawals.
Ashton Grove.
First,
No, they were
No,
here.
we started at
They were here on
6:01.
time.
I've been here since before 6.
No, they were
one-
here.
Which one was it? Which?
Oh, it's
Ashton Grove. It's the
That's
one that
one's
Bruce
right
got
beside.
up and.
Oh, that was the one that Mr. Langford spoke up and wanted it continued, and he did say it was
They
continued.
probably didn't realize it's continued to next.
Oh, I would too.
We sorry we kept it.
Yeah. We had Mr. Langford come up, and remember, we asked it to be continued. Yeah. Sorry about that, folks. And I speak pretty loud, too, I've been told. So, I was wondering.
This is better entertainment than television, isn't it?
I had my dinner before I come.
We
I wish I had.
We apologize for that.
We do apologize. Have a good evening, ladies. Joe, I mean,
About,
what does other
yeah.
commissioners think about?
Essentially,
I think it's a start.
the
You'll
only
have to hone
the
it
only
in.
thing I've really, I mean, I guess to let me go up.
And then do we?
The main things I did were to add the definitions that we don't have. I mean, we don't define the outdoor storage, just outdoor display and outdoor processing, adding those in.
What is
and-
outdoor processing, or what would be an example of outdoor processing?
Lumber, like a
Well,
lumber
that's where you're
mill or
actually
something, or-
cutting or
Changing
assembling
something.
or crushing. You know, you're doing something. You're not just
All right,
displaying.
making mulch.
You're not just storing it.
Well, not
You're
not
actually
making.
working
I
on it.
mean,
Gibson.
yeah, if you were to grind stuff up,
Yeah, okay.
if you
IMI,
here's my definition
making concrete.
right here. Perform a series of mechanical or physical operations on goods, materials, or merchandise in order to change, preserve, or consolidate them into another product.
So no venison
So, like,
processing.
if you're out, assembling, kind of,
That's what I thought first.
I don't. I can't think of really much that you would do processing that you do outside in a commercial. You don't do it all in a building for the most part. I mean, unless it's more agricultural type stuff
Say,
that
with
you
me, I
do.
think most of this is outdoor display, which if most everything gets grandfathered, we don't have to
It
worry
may be
about.
storage. We've had just at the Board of Adjustment for 40 years doing this, and it's always been display or storage. We've never had any processing requested.
Right.
Well,
So
what
that's why
about,
it needs to come out.
Steve just
You
mentioned.
do have, you have processing right now with
Now in Gibson.
Now
or
in Gibson
now
and then in the
What, Hamilton?
concrete plant.
But that's I-2, and you can do that there.
That's
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's not B.
What
But
about
those
the
are-
feed mill, where they pick up the
Southern
feed?
states, but
Would
that's
that be
semi
possible?
that's semi indoors. It's I mean there's
Yeah.
not
Same with
much
Highland
processing
feeds.
outdoors.
Highland's indoors.
Highlander.
Highlander, I'm sorry. What
Is
is
that
that?
agricultural though? Is that
No,
considered
that's
that
probably
or not?
B2.
Which one?
No,
Agricultural.
Highlander.
Should it?
That's
Highlander,
probably
Tracy
B2.
Highlander and
I wouldn't doubt it's been there for so long. I wouldn't doubt that way back when they
Ask
just
you before
assigned categories to things that were already there, it probably got an I just because it was already there. Just like mom and pops all over the county are B2s, even though we didn't have a B2 zone change ever on some of them.
I think you put your pencil to paper.
So I guess, well, just to get a little bit of feedback on this, the main thing that I've done here is add the definitions and then separate out outdoor display and sales and allow that as a permitted use as long as you show it on a development plan and it's 10% of the area. Now the other option is just to clarify all this and make it a conditional use, make outdoor display and sales, make outdoor storage, take out processing, but make those two things conditional uses. I think that's essentially what it was originally in the zoning ordinance, but when they added B4 and B5, they added language in there that say you can display stuff as long as you show it on the development plan. Well, that kind of contradicted what the original zoning ordinance said. And B2 didn't have any language in there, so it wasn't clear on what you were supposed to do there. So I think the two options are go back, make everything a conditional use, or separate out sales and display, outdoor sales and display, and say it's permitted. You don't make them get a conditional use as long as it's contained in a smaller area. Or if it's in a bigger area, they come back and get approval for it through the planning commission. Don't make them go to Board of Adjustment for outdoor sales and
It
display.
really makes
That's
no
the
sense
two options.
to have a development plan and make them go to the Board of Adjustment just for that piece. I think whatever you do, it needs to be on there that if it's shown on the development plan, then that's it. Because otherwise, we've had that so many times. Why would I have to do that when you've approved my plan? Well, in fact, the fellow you mentioned a moment ago raised holy Cain over that because he had outdoor storage. Approve that at the Planning Commission. And if it's something that hasn't had it at Planning Commission, then they've got to go get their conditional use as they ordinarily would. But otherwise, that just makes them give two steps when one step ought to be sufficient.
So I guess I'm just asking for direction on which of those approaches you all like better.
Yes.
Make them all conditional uses, or
No.
follow Charlie's
I would
advice?
say follow Charlie's.
Michaela
you do
and I
all
will object to
conditional
that.
use. It'd be a nightmare, Charlie.
Excuse me?
You do all conditional use. That'd be a nightmare.
Well, I mean, that's basically what's been done, except quite often when someone's had a new plan, they just thought that's ridiculous, and they didn't come. But those who did, we've had a separate hearing, separate discussions, and all of that, separate approvals or denials.
On all of them?
On many of them.
Okay.
I won't say all of them, because I know some went ahead and did it anyway. But we've had dozens and dozens and dozens of conditional use hearings on outdoor storage and display.
I like Charlie's answer. Yes.
All right. I'm fine with that.
Good. Now,
All
where's
right.
your hammer?
Yeah.
The
I need a
next,
hammer.
one other item, I wanted to get a vote, a resolution on appointing Janie Harrington, the office manager, the official custodian of records for open records requests. Mary was, I think, officially prior to her retirement, so if I could, she keeps the records now, but just
You
to
need a
have it
motion?
on,
Yes.
I make a motion.
Motion by Mrs. Mizell.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Smith. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Gets approved.
No, I know I'm the only.
And then, hold on. What?
I know I'm the only female on here.
Yeah, I got you. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Good, glad you did it first. Do we have a notary here to notarize this? Because if not, Mark, could you swing by the office tomorrow? My
I'm a
secretary.
notary, and you give it to me. I just don't have my.
But you can't notify because you're one of
Because
the
I was
signers.
gonna say, aren't I one of the
Yeah,
signers?
and I'm one of the signers, so I can't notarize it. So if you could just swing by the office, oh no, we're not gonna be there after lunch tomorrow. Why don't you, Monday
notarize
sometime,
it
just give a
before you
yell,
turn it in.
swing by, and
At your
Mark,
office?
yeah, and Mark can notarize both of us. All right, that's what, I'll take it.
You cannot know.
Don't they notarize it where you turn it in?
Yeah, I didn't realize that was one I saw.
I'm working on it.
I can't see that far, Charlie.
Sure,